Chapter 408. Chu Tian had made a mistake. It couldn't be considered a mistake, the plan itself was not a problem. First they would cut off the food of the large tribes, and when they were begging for a miracle, the Fox clan would release the news of the mysterious human merchant. When these natives heard that the Minotaurs in the Minotaur Valley, because they traded with this human merchant, not only did nothing happen to them during the famine, but they even ate and drank well every day, they would definitely go to the Minotaur Valley outside to investigate the situation. Who didn't know that the Minotaurs were the stupidest and were the first to starve to death? Now that they were eating and drinking, how could the other tribes not be jealous? The human merchant was very resourceful, so no matter how much food they needed, they would be able to supply it all. On one hand, they could supply high-quality food, and on the other hand, they could cut off other sources of food. These locals would be tightly bound by Chu Tian in the end, and Chu Tian's goal would be achieved. The problem now was that when Chu Tian had just started the first step of his plan, and before he could even start the second step, Dolores had already rushed over. There was a very urgent piece of news that several tribes were working together to attack Green City. This situation isn't good, Dolores said with a face of worry. It's like we've smashed our own feet with a rock. No, this isn't right. Chu Tian knit his brows and thought about it for a few minutes. This shouldn't be right. These tribes normally don't interact with each other and are suspicious of each other. How could they form an alliance in just 2-3 days? This definitely doesn't make sense. Dolores had already noticed this point. Although Green City's gnomes are very weak, they are not something these normal tribes dare challenge. I also suspect that there is a mastermind behind this. Chu Tian nodded. There was no need to doubt this was certain. Chu Tian had already been in the Fox clan for a week, and he already had a good understanding of Green City. This city's manager and founder were all gnomes. Although the half-elves weren't as powerful as the elves, they could be said to be one of the most knowledgeable races in the forest. The gnomes were different from the wood elves who had no desires. The gnomes were strict by nature and had a strong thirst for knowledge, so the gnomes had high attainments in source energy arrays. They had high standards in alchemy and talisman making. The reason Green City could maintain its rich state for several hundred years was because the gnomes' production had brought enough wealth to the city. The gnomes' equipment could be said to be very elite. Adding in the gnomes' talismans and traps, as well as various defensive facilities, it would make Green City a hard-to-attack city. If my guesses aren't wrong, the person behind this is most likely still in Green City. These locals can't take down Green City, they can only work together. Chu Tian asked Dolores, with your intuition, who do you think is the most suspicious? Dolores didn't even think before saying, shamanism or necromancy. Chu Tian said with a slight nod, we need to go to Green City. Why are you going to Green City? Of course it's to see the acting city lord. Chu Tian was an outsider and it was hard for an outsider to enter Green City, so he needed the Fox clan's help. Dolores and Chu Tian shared the same interests, so of course she agreed without even thinking about it. The demonic god religion had a bit of influence in Green City. Although the Fox clan was small, the Fox people had good brains, so they had a few stores in the city that mainly sold materials. Chu Tian disguised himself as a fox person and was led by Dolores, so it was much easier for them to enter Green City. Green City had already been established for 500 years. This was not considered too old in the Forest of Chaos, and this city had always been under the control of the Green Religion. The Green Religion was a religion of the elves, mainly believing in the forest god. The gnomes at their peak had over 1 million people, so they could be considered a large influence. In the last few decades, the Green Religion had quickly declined. The newly risen druid warriors, necromancers, and shaman sorcerers ran amok in Green City. They were already a serious threat to the gnomes. Although the gnomes were still the masters of Green City in name, they had already been divided. They were hindered by these 3 religions, and adding in the several decades of chaos, the influence of the green religion quickly declined. Chu Tian was currently standing in front of Green City. This is Green City? It really is a bit different from what I imagined. The cities in the Forest of Chaos were not something Southern Xia could compare to. Even the Southern Summer Imperial City could not compare to a tenth of this place. When Chu Tian saw Green City, his first impression was, it was grand, natural, and picturesque. Most of the cities in the Forest of Chaos did not have city walls, and the city walls did not have much meaning in defense. Although the Green City in front of him did not have city walls, because it was built in the middle of a mountain range, the mountain range surrounding it was a natural city wall. If he hadn't personally seen it, it would be hard to imagine that a city would suddenly appear in the middle of a mountain range. Green City did not have a lot of people, but the area it covered was several times larger than Southern Xia's Imperial City. The entire city was scattered in the middle of the mountain range, so the distribution was very interesting. If one looked at it from a macro perspective, it was like a trapezoid shape. Large amounts of castles were scattered, some were built at the foot of the mountain, some were built halfway up the mountain, and some were built at the top of the mountain. Sometimes there were two castles in the middle, separated by a several hundred-meter deep mountain stream that was only connected by a drawbridge. There were countless open areas in the middle of the mountain range, which were large amounts of planting and breeding areas. There was a main peak in the middle of the mountain range. It was originally a towering mountain, but the top half of it had been excavated and turned into a giant white castle. Half was a mountain and the other half was a city. Sitting at the peak of the mountain range, surrounded by clouds, it was like a city in the sky. This was a very special place. The cities built by the gnomes were completely different from the cities built by humans. In the large cities that humans lived in, the streets were orderly and the tall buildings were arranged in picturesque disorder. They were tightly packed together and were surrounded by city walls in an area. Green City's appearance was completely different. The entire city was made up of over 100 large and small castles, and each castle could be considered a small city. The castles surrounded the mountain range in layers, forming a trapezoid shape. Although they were very scattered, they were still very orderly. If a human city was a flat surface structure, then this city would be a three-dimensional structure. The entire Green City was perfectly integrated with nature. These cities that were carved out of the mountain or built out of thin air looked disorderly on the surface, but each building in Green City was very unique. The spiritual energy here was very rich, and there were countless spirit veins gathered here, giving birth to countless heaven and earth treasures, but there were no fierce beasts. This was very rare in the Forest of Chaos. In this endless mountain range, it was unknown how many precious ore veins were hidden. It was definitely a good place for long-term development. Ha ha ha! Chu Tian gave a few loud laughs. There is a city in the mountains, there is a mountain in the city, the forest surrounds the rivers surrounds the mountains, and the mountains surrounds the city. My city looks very good. But I see that the city has not even been developed by 10% and the entire mountain range has not even been developed by 2%. I'm prepared to connect all of this together and create a large city-state that can hold several tens of millions of people, making it the largest city in the Forest of Chaos. What do you think? Sir City Lord, it seems like you're happy too early. Dolores rolled her eyes, disagreeing with Chu Tian's grand ambitions. Don't forget, your city will be captured by a group of people and it might turn to ashes in a few days. Those locals? Pay. When would Uncle Chu Tian place them in his eyes? But speaking of this city was indeed better than imagined. The city the gnomes used 500 years to build had been taken advantage of by Chu Tian in the end. Not only was this place rich in spiritual energy, it was also in the center of the Forest of Chaos, making it the most suitable base for miracle commerce. If Chu Tian could gain a foothold in this place, he could use this place as the center and allow the company to expand. At that time, the Dragon's Ridge, the Titan Mountain Range, the Savage Highlands, the Eternal Forest, or the distant Western Sea or the dark underground world, would Chu Tian be able to properly deal with them? The Forest of Chaos had the potential to become an empire. Of course, the premise was to unify this area, which was not an easy matter. Let's enter the city. Green City did not just have a natural mountain barrier, there were also many natural passages that could be used to enter Green City from all directions. Dolores led Chu Tian through a passage covered in white moonlight stones. Not only were there shrubs and green grass on both sides, there were also many tall trees. What surprised Chu Tian the most was that there was a type of large tree that had grown into the shape of a human. It had thick arms and a huge spear in its hands. It was like a 10-meter-tall giant guard that stood motionlessly in the passageway. What is this? Chu Tian was a bit surprised. This thing looked like a treant, but it was definitely not a treant because Chu Tian could feel that this thing did not have a will and was a giant puppet life form. This is the Green Protector. Dolores explained. The Green religion studied the remains of the ancient war trees and finally cultivated a powerful life form. 100 years ago, Green City was filled with these powerful warriors, but after being attacked several times, they were all lost. In the last 10 years, there have been several disasters and a large number of them have died, so there aren't many left. Chu Tian continued walking with Dolores. There were at least 3 layers of barriers protecting this canyon. There was a reason why Green City could stand in this place. With these green protectors and the defenses in the passage, Green City could stop large forest powers from invading. As long as it wasn't a giant like the Eternal Forest, Green City could easily protect itself. Of course, that was for the previous Green City. The current Green City was very weak, and there were many problems both inside and outside, so it was very bad. If it wasn't like this, why would the gnomes surrender to the Eternal Forest? The Elven Council was really a group of rotten heads, actually not wanting a good place that was delivered to their door. In the end, Chu Tian had picked up a large bargain. Chapter 409. The gnomes were not xenophobic like the elves, they were a relatively tolerant race. As long as one could have a good relationship with the gnomes, no matter what race or religion they were from, they were all qualified to have a place in Green City. Foreign merchants could also temporarily stay in Green City. This open policy made Green City prosper, but it also brought a series of troubles to Green City. The reason why those cults could quickly develop in Green City and even threaten the gnomes' rule, other than the power behind the church supporting them in secret, was because it was too easy for them to infiltrate. There were several shaman altars in Green City and a large-scale shaman temple. The shaman religion mainly focused on spirit beasts and had developed very quickly in Green City over the past few decades. Now their influence at the grassroots level was even faintly surpassing the Green religion. Acting City Lord Clark anxiously paced back and forth. The surrounding tribes were preparing to attack Green City, which made him feel pressured. Therefore, he sent out a group of envoys early in the morning, hoping they could resolve this problem. After all, with Green City's current weakness, it was clear they couldn't take any more trouble. The negotiation this time was entirely about stability. Green City was very sincere. But why hadn't the envoy returned yet? While Clark was feeling a bit uneasy. Sir Acting City Lord. An assistant quickly charged in. The envoy. The envoy has been killed and the bandits have gathered. What did you say? Clark angrily slapped the table. These damn fellows, getting an inch and wanting a foot, their greed knows no bounds. Do they really think Green City is afraid of a mob like them? This assistant was very flustered. I think they are about to attack, we should deal with them as soon as possible. The gnomes were not a martial race, so there weren't many warriors in the tribe. The Green Protectors had suffered a lot in the past few decades, and this wave of locals would cause a large amount of damage to Green City. Of course, this was not what the acting city lord was most worried about. What he was most worried about was the mastermind behind this plot. Plagues, famine, and riots, it was always wave after wave. When had the forest been peaceful during this period of time? Clark had always been suspicious of the identity of the mastermind behind this matter. After all, famine was one of the main causes of war, and when the locals were in danger, they took the chance to stir up chaos. This was not hard to explain. Clark powerlessly waved his hand. Have the clansmen prepare. Yes. If the Eternal Forest could accept Green City, he would not need to worry about these matters. Acting City Lord, there's someone outside requesting an audience. Clark didn't have the time to meet this person. Just as he was about to order them to leave, Clark's heart suddenly stirred. Who is it? I'm not sure. One is a human and the other is from the fox race. The fox race seems to be the priestess of the Church of the Devil God, Dolores. Humans? Invite them in. Clark seemed like he understood something and his brows knit together. Most of the gnomes didn't know the truth and thought that the Eternal Forest's army would arrive at Green City at any time. Only Clark and a few others knew about the Elven King's matter of a human city lord, but this matter couldn't be spread. There weren't many races on the continent that liked humans. The gnomes were no exception. Moreover, humans here were synonymous with outsiders, and outsiders meant that they were nothing in the local area. Even a powerful dragon would not be able to suppress a local snake, not to mention that the other party was at most a flying mouse. How was it possible for him to inform such a large group of snakes? Clark sent everyone away, and Chu Tian and Dolores walked in. Dolores politely gave a slight bow to the gnomes in front of her. Demonic god priest Dolores greets acting City Lord Clark. Clark did not look at Dolores, but he looked at Chu Tian with a gaze filled with contempt. Humans had short lifespans and this person looked very young, perhaps not even 20 years old among humans. He was no different from a child. Even if the Elven King was irrational, he shouldn't have sent this kind of person to manage Green City, right? Clark said in a somewhat malicious voice. Green City does not welcome human travelers. What matter does Your Excellency and Priest Dolores have to come see me for? I'm very sorry, I'm not a traveler. Chu Tian did not have any thoughts of hiding it at all. He took out the Elven King's token and secret letter, and placed it on the table. I am called Chu Tian, the Elven King has appointed me as Green City's City Lord. You? Clark's eyes popped out. Someone like you can be Green City's City Lord? I think the Elven King is confused. I'd rather surrender to the spirit beasts. These were not completely words of anger. Clark never would have thought that when he sincerely surrendered to the Eternal Forest would treat the gnomes like this. Letting a human who hadn't even grown hair be the city lord? This was simply an insult to Green City and an insult to the gnomes. Green City's situation was this complicated. What could this human do? Chu Tian saw the anger on the gnome's face and his heart was filled with helplessness. According to the original plan, Chu Tian was prepared to subdue a group of local tribes. After gathering the support of these locals, he would come to Green City to take over the city lord's position and move the entire miracle commerce over. Because there was a change in the plan and the locals wanted to attack Green City, Chu Tian had to change the order and come to Green City first. Why does acting City Lord Clark think I can't be the City Lord? Then what makes you think you can be the City Lord? With my knowledge, my talent, and my mind, I can do things the gnomes can't. Chu Tian shamelessly said, if acting City Lord Clark doesn't believe me, we can make a simple bet. Clark was stunned. How do you want to bet? Within a month, I will eradicate all of Green City's internal problems. Whether it is the shamans, necromancers, druids, or anything else. Chu Tian knew that he would be questioned if he was alone, so he could only brag to increase his reputation. If I can do it, the gnomes must recognize my abilities. If I can't do it, you don't need to feel awkward. I will go to the Eternal Forest and resign from the Elven King. Clark revealed a look of disbelief. Do you know what you're saying? Do you know what the shaman sorcerers and necromancers represent? It's just the savage highlands and the Dragon's Ridge. What is there to worry about? Clark carefully sized up the human in front of him. Although he didn't believe that this human could do it, judging from his calm expression and demeanor, he was indeed more mature than he had imagined. All right, I'll bet with you. This was a task that was almost impossible to complete. The gnomes were being pressured by these foreign powers, so they became weaker and weaker, having no choice but to rely on the eternal forest. If Chu Tian could really solve these problems for Green City, then why couldn't he be the city lord? Of course, this was a task that was impossible to complete. At this time, there were fierce shouts coming from outside the discussion hall. Chu Tian was a bit stunned. What is going on? Clark knit his brows and hesitated for 2 seconds. The envoy sent by Green City to negotiate with the tribes has been sent back after being killed. The clansmen are very excited and naturally protest, requesting to fight. I'm afraid this battle is hard to avoid. Chu Tian slightly raised his brows. I want to see the envoy's corpse. What do you want to do? Clark was a bit vigilant. This gnome envoy died for Green City, so he should be buried in the forest temple, returning to the embrace of the forest god. Chu Tian said, I just want to see the person who sacrificed himself for Green City. Perhaps I can find something from his body. That's natural. Clark's brows slightly relaxed. This foreign human actually knew the Green religion's beliefs and traditions. All right, but the priest will be holding the funeral soon, so I'll give you at most 10 minutes. That's enough. Dolores looked at Chu Tian with a bit of surprise. Why did this fellow want to see a corpse? Clark brought Chu Tian into the forest temple. This was a giant natural cave, and the entire space was covered in tree root. There was an altar in the center with an intact corpse lying on top of it. Chu Tian found that the corpse's neck was sewn together, so it should have been beheaded by someone. His eyes slightly narrowed as he said, What did you send him to discuss? Of course it was to discuss how to survive the famine. Clark's face filled with anger when he saw the envoy's corpse. The gnomes were even willing to open Green City's warehouse to borrow some food, but who would have thought that these damn fellows would be this greedy? Did they really think that Green City was something they could break through? Chu Tian shook his head. Perhaps the envoy did not say that. I'm guessing that after he went to the locals, he must have used strong words and even insulted them. In the end, he angered the locals and was killed. What nonsense are you saying? Acting City Lord Clark had a bit of good impression of this human, but it had completely disappeared at this moment. You dare question the gnome's strict faith? Chu Tian did not explain. His right hand suddenly released a faint light and he drew a rune on the gnome's forehead. Under the effect of this rune, the gnome's corpse began to violently tremble. Acting City Lord Clark was already filled with rage. What did you do? Chu Tian softly said, See for yourself. There was suddenly a sharp whistle that came from the gnome's ear. There was a disgusting bug that came out and Chu Tian casually pinched it in his hand. Dolores cried out in shock. This is the shaman sorcerer's witchcraft insect. This is something that can control one's mind and thoughts. It should have been refined by some kind of witchcraft. Chu Tian looked at the struggling insect in his hand. If my guesses aren't wrong, this envoy had just left Green City when he was attacked. This insect was planted in his brain and his mind was controlled to participate in the negotiations. In the end, he angered the locals and was killed, as well as angering the gnomes. Dolores was suddenly enlightened. This also means that the one behind the scenes is the shamans? That's right. Since we've locked onto the one behind the scenes, this matter will be much easier. A blue and white flame was released from Chu Tian's fingertip and the insect was not even ash left. Then let me experience this so-called shaman religion. Acting City Lord Clark was stunned. This young human did not seem simple. Chapter 410. Dolores admired Chu Tian even more. The shaman religion was a mysterious religion of the spirit beasts in the savage highlands. It was different from the demonic god religion's summoning and beast taming technique. The shaman sorcerers mainly used curse attacks, soul attacks, witchcraft, and insect poisons. This kind of strange insect controlling technique was definitely a high-level witchcraft technique of the shaman religion. The person controlled by this witchcraft technique was no different from a normal person. There was no way to detect it. This was because their mind, soul, and thoughts did not have any additional states. It was purely controlling their thoughts on a physical and material level. The runes drawn by Chu Tian had not disappeared yet, and Clark's face was filled with a bit of surprise. You can only use witchcraft to remove the shaman's witchcraft. This seems to be a shaman technique, you. It's just a small trick, not worth mentioning. The shaman religion was recorded in history, but in Chu Tian's era, this religion had already disappeared. Chu Tian had seen records of the shaman's witchcraft in an ancient book. This witchcraft did not need a special shaman cultivation technique, it was just a secret technique. Chu Tian had studied it a bit in the past. Although he was not proficient in it, it was more than enough to break these small insects. Since he knew who the opponent was, it was easy to deal with them. I still feel that the famine around Green City is a bit strange. Dolores knit her brows. This famine was strange, but she couldn't find anything strange about it. In the past, unless there was a migration of beasts, a large-scale natural disaster, or a geological change, it would cause the beasts living in the Greenland to change. There were no signs this time. It was a strange change. Clark was already suspicious of this. The shaman sorcerers set up an altar to use witchcraft to disturb the beasts, causing this series of changes. This is completely possible in theory. Only, we don't have any evidence and we don't know when it started. Even if we tell them now, those tribes won't believe us. No wonder the shamans reacted so quickly. Father actually helped them. Perhaps they had been preparing for several months, so they immediately grabbed the chance. This caused Chu Tian's plan to fail. This was too hateful. Speaking of this, the shaman religion's influence was not small. In the area around Green City, they had several 100,000 followers. Now they were inciting the locals to unite. Perhaps while the locals were attacking Green City, the shaman religion would send their followers to attack. Like this, even if the green religion wasn't defeated, they would still suffer a large loss. I'm most worried about the shaman's witchcraft. Clark seemed to realize the seriousness of the matter. We don't know when the messenger was controlled by this kind of insect. Could be recently, or it could be even longer. Since the shaman sorcerer can control a half-elf, he can definitely control more half-elves. This is an objective reality. Chu Tian carefully introduced the shaman's witchcraft. This kind of voodoo would not kill the host directly. After it drilled into the host's brain, it would quickly take over the host's brain nerves, as well as his emotions and way of thinking. The host would be completely controlled in a state of unconsciousness. He would be able to eat and sleep as usual, and the people closest to him would not notice any abnormalities. These people controlled by the voodoo were like time bombs. When the shaman religion needed to use these chess pieces, the shaman priests would use witchcraft to activate them. The host would instantly lose their ability to think and become a puppet under the control of the shaman's witchcraft. The shaman sorcerer did not need to completely control the host's thoughts and could use witchcraft to subtly change the host's thoughts. This was because emotions were a kind of spiritual energy, and spiritual energy could be created through material method. Dolores and Clark were both dumbfounded. The shaman's witchcraft was mysterious and vicious, but outsiders knew very little about it. This foreign human was even more knowledgeable than the locals who had dealt with the shaman sorcerers for decades. This kind of witchcraft that could control one's thoughts was clearly a secret of the shaman religion. How did he know about it? No wonder, no wonder. The shaman religion could develop this quickly. Not only did they have a large influence in the surrounding tribes, there were also several shaman temples in Green City. So the problem was here. The local army had several 100,000 followers. They had several 100,000 followers over the years. There were also over 100 true spirit realm shaman sorcerers, as well as the core fighting strength of the shaman religion, as well as the puppets they had controlled in Green City over the years. This was a very terrifying strength. The local army had been formed for 3-4 days, and there were already over 100,000 of them gathered. It was said that this number was still increasing, and it could reach several 100,000. These locals had mostly mobilized all the adult males in their tribes. With this kind of effort and high efficiency, who would believe that the shamans weren't playing tricks on them? Once the locals attacked the city, the shaman religion's army would also attack. Adding in the cooperation of Green City, how would the gnomes deal with this situation? Also, if the shaman spirit beasts and the Green City gnomes fought, would the undead religion warlocks just stand by and watch? Even the druids were an unknown variable. Chu Tian pointed out all the stakes. Mr. is truly clear on this matter. Clark never thought that Chu Tian would be so clear on this matter. He was sitting high up as the acting city lord, but he was actually this careless. His head was covered in sweat at this moment. Green City's situation is even more dangerous than I thought. The gnomes were proficient in research, but they were not good at diplomacy or military tactics. Now that the water was becoming muddier, he couldn't think of a way to solve it. Dolores was also shocked, not to mention Clark, who would have thought that the situation would be this bad. Who would have thought that the situation would be this bad? Clark asked in a trembling voice, "Then how many gnomes does Mr. think have become puppets of the shaman sorcerers?" This kind of goo is very hard to refine, and it will consume the refiner's cultivation and vitality, so there won't be many of them. You don't need to worry about this. Chu Tian carefully considered it. Just follow my arrangements. The gnomes will only be responsible for stabilizing Green City, and I will take care of everything else. Could this situation really be taken care of? Clark already had no confidence in his heart. He could only believe in this outsider, a person that could become Green City's city lord. In the evening, the 150,000 elites of the forest gathered in the forest. The morale of the locals was high and they were filled with killing intent. When they gathered, there would be locals joining in from time to time. Of course, these were all small powers that wanted to take advantage of the situation to loot Green City. The Allied Army Conference began. The ogres, tigers, leopards, lizards, snakes. The various large tribe chiefs and the high-level members of the various tribes all came to participate in this conference. These different local leaders all had angry expressions on their faces at this moment. Green City is too arrogant. They actually want to exterminate us and make us their slaves. These gnomes don't even know they are about to die. Do they really think they are still 100 years ago? We will quickly gather several 100,000 people. At that time, with the support of the shaman religion's witchcraft, our battle strength will increase by more than double. It will be easy for us to flatten these outwardly strong gnomes. The entire Allied army was covered in a layer of rage, violence, and fanaticism. They all wanted to charge into Green City and burn Green City to ashes, stealing all the wealth and food. Several goat-race shaman priests stood in the corner with a smile of ridicule on their faces. The Minotaur chief Arnold is leading 5,000 Minotaurs to join the alliance. The group of locals suddenly became excited. The Minotaurs were very strong and they had bodies not inferior to ogres, but they specialized in charging at the front lines. The charge of these 5,000 Minotaurs was enough to easily tear apart the weak gnomes' defenses. Arnold was the Minotaur tribe's chief, but he was actually personally participating in this mission. This Arnold was the youngest chief of the Minotaurs in 200 years. He was a typical blockhead with a fiery and straightforward personality. He was a Minotaur that couldn't be more traditional, but with the Minotaurs' personalities, they wouldn't play any trick. Since Arnold had personally come, it meant that the Minotaurs also wanted to steal from Green City. More than a dozen tribal chiefs and a few shaman sorcerers received Arnold. One of the tribe chiefs said, "Arnold, you're only taking out 5,000 minotaurs, isn't that too little? There are over 100,000 minotaurs in the Minotaur Valley." Another tribe chief followed up, "We'll split the loot according to work, whoever does more will get more. I'm afraid 5,000 minotaurs won't be enough. The minotaurs aren't just sending soldiers." Arnold gave a simple smile. "You don't lack soldiers, so the minotaurs will give you what you lack the most." "What do we lack?" "Food." "What?" The various tribe chiefs were stunned. "You're saying you'll give us food?" Arnold's large body moved to the side and he pointed at the minotaurs behind him. All the tribe chiefs looked over. Several thousand fully armed minotaurs were pulling a large pile of tin cans, giving them to the local soldiers one by one. The entire allied camp was covered in cheers. The various tribe chiefs were all stunned. What is going on?" Arnold said with a laugh. "A human merchant came to the Minotaurs not long ago and this food was bought from him. There's enough good wine and meat, enough to fight our way to Green City." "Human merchant? Where did this human merchant come from? How could he bring this much food into the forest?" The local chiefs were all surprised and their killing intent weakened by a lot. There were even some people who asked Arnold how to contact this human merchant. "I don't know his background." Arnold shook his head, "But if you need, I can help you contact him." The shaman priests looked at each other. They could see the surprise in each other's eyes. One of the shaman priests pinched a seal and muttered an incantation. Roar! An ogre suddenly roared out, "If we take down Green City, how much food can we not have? Why spend a large amount of money to trade with a human merchant? Not to mention, who knows how much food this merchant can provide. If we take down Green City, it will be enough for us to eat for 10 years. That's right. Attack Green City. Arnold, your food has come at the right time. Once our soldiers are full, we will definitely take down Green City. We'll give you a portion at that time." Arnold nodded. This Minotaur chief looked over at the shaman priest and revealed a strange expression. Chapter 411. Green City, the Shaman Temple. Several dozen shaman priests were gathered around the altar for a ceremony. The shaman religion came from the savage highlands. The religion's followers were mainly spirit beasts, orcs, and trolls, believing in the shaman god and the sorcerer god. The Green City shaman religion had existed several hundred years ago. At that time, the gnomes' green religion was still very strong, so the shaman religion did not have much development. Several decades ago, the gnomes experienced several wars and quickly weakened, so the shaman religion welcomed an opportunity to develop in the Green City area. Several decades ago, the savage highlands sent the high priest Mars to Green City, allowing Mars to develop the entire Green City area. Because the high priest Mars was very strong and adding in the resources of the savage highlands, the shaman religion in Green City had increased by several dozen times in just a few decades. Now, there were several tens of thousands of shaman sorcerers in Green City. The several tens of thousands of shaman sorcerers were all very dangerous characters, and there were over 100 shaman sorcerers who had obtained the surrender of the shaman priest. If a shaman sorcerer wanted to become an official shaman priest, not only did they need to be at the true spirit realm, they also needed to practice their witchcraft to perfection. Just like this, the shaman religion had gained a foothold in Green City. The high priest led the several tens of thousands of shaman sorcerers to negotiate with the gnomes, obtaining the qualifications to build a temple in Green City. Then they spread to the surrounding tribes, and now the number of shaman religion believers in the forest had reached several 100,000. This was a power that could threaten the green religion. At this moment, there were over 2,000 strong figures that were densely packed together in the shaman temple. They did not move at all, just like statues. Each one of them released a terrifying aura. They were definitely strong characters in the forest. They were already not people. These fellows were covered in the runes of the shaman religion, just like a giant human painting. From their feet to their legs to their bodies, from their heads to their chests to their fingers, they were completely covered. A strong curse and witchcraft energy was being released from these people's bodies. Voodoo puppets, these were puppets refined from extremely cruel witchcraft. The shaman sorcerers sang and danced around the voodoo puppets for a while before suddenly gently pulling the voodoo puppets' hair. In the end, their scalps and skulls were pulled out, just like opening a lid, but these voodoo puppets did not move at all. The brains of every wizard puppet had long been hollowed out. The shaman sorcerer grabbed a bunch of worms, which looked like thousands of centipedes or earthworms, and stuffed them into the empty skull of the shaman puppet. Every insect was a witchcraft that the shaman sorcerer had spent a lot of effort to refine. After stuffing these insects that contained powerful witchcraft power into the shaman puppet's brain, the shaman sorcerer immediately covered its skull and started singing again. On the shaman altar, a white-haired old troll raised his hands high. A thick and vigorous energy revolved around the shaman temple. "Great shaman god and witch god, please accept the sacrifice of your servant, and bestow upon the wizard puppet great power." A burst of intense light exploded from the altar, turning into thousands of light beams that landed on the Wu puppet's body. The worms that were wriggling in the skull instantly became several times more active, drilling into the Wu puppet's body. Every Wu puppet had worms crawling under its skin, and the light from the shaman runes on its body became even more intense. Finally, the things that were motionless like statues were awakened. Their originally empty eyes suddenly had eyeballs, and they were filled with spirit. They all knelt down on one knee, and a deep voice came from their mouths, "Long live the shamans." The 2,000 shaman sorcerers' carefully refined Wu puppets were finally awakened. These puppets were not ordinary puppets, other than the fact that they were enchanted with all kinds of witchcraft and curses from head to toe, which gave each of them a terrifying combat strength. Their bodies were almost immortal. They were not afraid of fire, water, acid, or cutting. They even had simple thinking abilities. They could be said to be perfect puppet warriors. The time has come. A white-haired old troll opened his eyes, revealing a pair of sparkling eyes. "This battle will turn Green City into ruins." This was the shaman high priest Mars from the savage highlands. He was an old troll with unfathomable witchcraft and was already over 150 years old this year. Mars called out in a low voice, "Luz, High Priest, what orders do you have?" A green-skinned orc walked in front of Mars. Luz was an orc shaman, and although he was young, his attainments in witchcraft were very shocking. Luz's witchcraft was second only to Mars, therefore he had a very high position in the Greenland shaman religion. He was basically the number 2 person and was also Mars' assistant. Mars looked at his assistant and said, "How are the preparations of the troops outside?" Lurtz replied, "When the tribes start to attack, the shaman army will also start to attack. With our help from the inside, this battle is almost certain. We can't be careless. Although the gnomes are weak, no one knows what cards they have." Mars said in a deep voice, "The gnomes have surrendered to the eternal forest, so we don't have much time left. We can use the chess pieces we've buried among the gnomes. Go and awaken them." "Yes, High Priest." Luz brought several shaman sorcerers to a secluded cliff and began to use witchcraft, activating the chess pieces the shamans had buried among the gnomes. These chess pieces had been unknowingly infected by the shaman's brain-controlling witchcraft. The goo had already parasitized the brains of the gnomes, and as long as the shamans did not activate it, the gnomes would return to normal. Now it was time to use these chess pieces. Luz and the shaman sorcerers began to chant and immediately felt the existence of the witchcraft. They were all activated, allowing the witchcraft to take over their thoughts, making these gnomes come here to meet him. The sorcerer could send a few simple messages to the witchcraft, like calling them over. But those complex instructions could not be directly sent. The shaman sorcerer had to bring the host to their side and directly send detailed instructions to the host. After around 20 minutes, 5 gnomes appeared here. These were the 5 gnomes controlled by the shaman sorcerers. They were all high-level gnomes, and as long as they controlled these gnomes, they could open the barrier at the critical moment and turn off the green protectors. This would paralyze Green City's defenses and increase the shaman religion's chances of winning by at least 20%. Let's begin. Luz waved his hand. The 5 shaman sorcerers walked over to the 5 gnomes. They were prepared to control them and send out the relevant instructions. Suddenly, the 5 gnomes made a move at almost the same time. Poisonous vines shot out from the ground and instantly wrapped around the 5 defenseless shaman sorcerers. Finally, a vine pierced through their bodies. What? Luz was shocked. Before he could understand what was happening, the grass around him was suddenly bestowed with some kind of power as a low and deep voice echoed in his ears. God of nature above, please bestow the vitality of a giant dragon upon all living beings. This was the Green Religion's giant dragon's power technique. It was definitely a high-level technique. There were less than 10 people in Green City that could use this move. Luz could no longer run. The originally soft grass suddenly began to wildly swell, instantly turning him into a giant rice dumpling. When the natural energy was added, each blade of grass became harder than steel and had a very terrifying strength. As long as the other side was willing, even an earth dragon could be turned into mincemeat. The energy released from the grass could even suppress Luz's spirit energy, making him lose the ability to resist. Clark put down his staff and gave a cold laugh. You didn't expect it. It's you. Luz looked at Clark and then at the 5 dead sorcerers before looking at the 5 normal gnomes. He could clearly feel that the voodoo insects were in the gnomes' brains, but he didn't know why he couldn't activate them. At this time, there was a handsome human youth that was leading a seductive Fox clan member, walking out from behind Clark. Demonic god priest? Luz couldn't understand why a priest of such a weak sect would appear here. Dolores revealed a tender smile. Sir City Lord truly has divine foresight. Not only did you catch him in the act, you also caught the second in command of the shaman religion. Strange, how did you know that Mars would send this fellow? Letting the gnome puppets remove Green City's defenses is a very important task. If I was that high priest, I would have sent the most capable person to do it. How do we deal with this person? I think it's better to just kill him. Dolores's words made Luz's expression change. She continued to say, this fellow's position in the shaman religion is not low. If we can kill him, not only will it decrease the shaman religion's strength, it will also greatly affect their morale. Clark also thought the same. Luz's witchcraft skills were only below Mars. He could easily kill him with a sneak attack, otherwise it would not have been so easy to subdue him. Chu Tian shook his head as he walked in front of Luz. Priest Luz, your father has always been a local shaman. Before Mars came, your father was the shaman leader here, am I right? So what? If there was no Mars, you would have inherited your father's legacy and become the local shaman leader. The meaning in Chu Tian's words was very clear. The shamans have always been independent. Why would you listen to Mars and become a puppet and chess piece of the Savage Highlands? Luz gave a cold laugh. Don't you think this method of sowing discord is too laughable? I think you should first understand a problem. I'm not trying to drive a wedge between you, and actually eradicating a trivial shaman religion is not a hard matter for me. I don't need to use this kind of method. I just feel that it is a pity for the shamans to disappear from Green City. After all, the shaman witchcraft still has a bit of use. Luz had a strange expression on his face. This fellow's tone was very light, like he did not place the local shaman religion in his eyes at all. Mars was a shaman priest sent by the Savage Highlands. He had directly received orders from the Savage Highlands, so there was no possibility of peace talks. The only one he could use was Luz. Chu Tian then said, First let me introduce myself. I am the Elven King's Green City's city lord, and this place will become my territory. I'll give you two choices now. One is to turn to ashes with the shamans, or the other is to join hands with me to defeat Mars. I'll let you become the local shaman leader, giving you protection and freedom. I'll allow the shamans to become a member of Green City and let you develop in Green City. Why would the Eternal Forest send a human to be the city lord? Luz looked at Clark beside him. Although Clark's expression was a bit complicated, it seemed to confirm his words. I don't know much about curses or witchcraft, but I have a bit of confidence in my alchemy skills. Chu Tian took out a pill and forcefully shoved it into Luz's mouth. This pill will take effect in 3 days and corrode your entire body, finally causing you to dissolve and die. Don't try your luck. There is no one in the Forest of Chaos that can cure my pill. I believe you are a smart person, and a smart person should know how to make a smart choice. I have at least 10 ways to destroy you. Even if Green City can't destroy you, are you willing to be ordered around by the Savage Highlands and become a pawn that can be sacrificed at any time? I've already said this, you can decide for yourself. Chu Tian waved his hand at Clark and Clark released him. Chu Tian did not even look at him as he immediately left with Clark and Dolores. Damn. Luz could feel that there was a medicinal energy that had spread to every cell in his body in just a few seconds. He had never seen such a powerful poison that could hide itself. The human was not lying. Perhaps it would be hard to find someone in the Forest of Chaos that could cure this poison. Not to mention that the incubation period was only 3 days. This also meant that if he didn't make a choice in 3 days, he would die for sure. Damn. He had fallen to this point because of a moment of carelessness. Where did that mysterious human come from? From their appearance, it seemed like they did not place the shaman religion in their eyes. When Luz returned to the shaman temple, High Priest Urs looked at him. Have you arranged the chess pieces? Luz lowered his head with a strange look in his eyes. He said in a calm voice, High Priest can be assured, everything has been arranged. Chapter 412. Luz could not explain the reason. When he saw that young human, he had a bad premonition in his heart. What made him make this decision in the end was not the poison in his body, but rather that human's methods. He could break the witchcraft. The 5 gnomes were clearly controlled by the witchcraft. The witchcraft was still in their minds, but the shaman sorcerer had lost control of them. This made Luz feel very uneasy. The shaman sorcerer's witchcraft curse could not be broken. This was where the shaman sorcerer's confidence came from. Now the truth was in front of him. Not only had the witchcraft been broken, he had also seen through the shaman religion's plans. The gnome Clark was already making preparations. Like this, the shamans were in a disadvantageous position. This battle that they had a 90% chance of winning had been reduced by at least half. Luz's ancestors had come to the Green City area and he had been a native shaman since his father's generation, so he did not have much contact with the Savage Highlands. If it wasn't for the Savage Highlands sending High Priest Mars, the two of them would have become 2 different powers. This was something that the human had calculated very accurately. Although Mars had absolute authority in the religion and all the shaman priests had to listen to him, the local shaman sorcerers made up the majority of the Greenland's shamans. Rather than saying they were afraid of High Priest Mars, it was better to say they were afraid of the giant hidden in the Savage Highlands. Once the Savage Highlands were enraged, the little Greenland's shamans were not worth mentioning at all. In fear of this giant, the Greenland shamans had no choice but to accept Mars' leadership, becoming a power placed in Green City by the Savage Highlands. According to normal development, the shaman sorcerers would continue to erode the gnomes and finally control Green City. Who would have thought that the gnomes would suddenly rely on the Eternal Forest? This made the Savage Highlands very angry. In order to prevent the Eternal Forest from controlling the city, they decided to destroy Green City. The Green City Shaman's foundation was in Green City, so without Green City, they would be greatly affected. The gnomes were not weak, so if they went all out against the gnomes, the shamans would have to pay a heavy price. Not to mention that Green City already belonged to the Eternal Forest. The strength of the elves was not something the shamans could imagine. Luz could already vaguely feel that they had become a chess piece for the forest giant. A chess piece used to test the Eternal Forest's bottom line, a chess piece that could be sacrificed at any time. Lurtz pondered for a long time before coming to a decision. He said to the shaman beside him, "Call Priest Carell and Priest Hilton over, I have something to discuss with them." Priest Carell and Priest Hilton were Luz's trusted aides and the main leaders of the Green Country shamans, so he had to discuss this matter with them. Chu Tian brought Dolores and Clark away from Lurt. Clark said uneasily, "You're going to let Luz off just like that? He is not a character that is easy to control. It was hard for us to regain this advantage, but if Mars notices this, perhaps Green City will fall into a disadvantageous situation." Clark now had a whole new level of respect for this young man. Chu Tian had only been in the Green City area for a week, and he had only studied the situation of the major powers and their main members before arranging today's plan. It was bold and radical. If it really succeeded, it would greatly reduce the pressure, but if it failed, Green City would lose this advantage. This was because once the shaman sorcerers noticed it, the gnomes would find it hard to carry out their plans. Damn, that damn old gnome. He actually doesn't believe me? Chu Tian's face was filled with disdain as he said to Dolores beside him, "Do you believe me?" Sir City Lord breaking the shaman's witchcraft has dealt a large psychological blow to Luz, making him doubt the effectiveness of the shaman's witchcraft. The poison that Sir City Lord gave him is a threat to Luz's survival. There is no one in this world that is willing to die. Dolores seemed like she had already understood. The most important thing is that Sir City Lord has cleverly used the shaman sorcerers' internal differences, especially the Highland shamans represented by Mars and the Green City shamans represented by Luz. This relationship is not obvious normally, but in this special period, there is a lot that can be done. So I think this plan can be tried. Chu Tian said with a nod, "After I become the City Lord, you will be the City Lord's assistant." Dolores revealed a look of joy and immediately thanked him in a sweet voice. Clark, on the other hand, felt very awkward. This human seemed to think that the City Lord's throne was already in the bag, which made him feel a little unhappy. Even if this human had some ability, he was still a human. Half-elves would not be convinced by humans. What should we do now? The shamans have pretty much been dealt with. We need to guard against other powers trying to fish in troubled waters. According to what I know, other than the shamans, the most troublesome ones in Green City are the undead religion and the druid. That's right. Clark's expression turned serious again. Although he was a bit unsatisfied with the human in front of him, this was related to the survival of Green City, so he did not dare be too careless. The founder of the undead religion is a lich from the Dragon's Ridge, Segister. This lich is very strange and mysterious, not showing himself at all. Even the necromancer priests under him are very strange, so we can't predict their movements like the shamans. It is simply impossible to guard against them. What about the druids? The druids are different from the shamans and the undead. The druids are a very loose but widely spread religion in the Forest of Chaos. The druids gathered around Green City should not have any background, but they are rebellious and don't listen to discipline, turning a blind eye to Green City's rules. They have been doing things their own way for a long time, which gives me a headache. It's like this. The gnomes really had no future. A good city was actually turned into this by these foreign powers. It was no wonder they had to rely on the Eternal Forest. Dolores asked, "Our main enemy this time is the shamans. Although we can't rule out the undead and druids taking advantage of the chaos, if we make plans against them at the same time, I'm afraid it will scatter our energy and it will be disadvantageous to the overall situation." You're right. Chu Tian did not plan on eliminating them all at once. After all, with Green City's current strength, it was not enough to fight 1 against 3. he asked Clark. How many green protectors does Green City have? There are a total of 3,000, with 2,000 being weakened by a strange disease. The others need to guard the passages and passes, so I'm afraid there is no way to transfer them. Strange disease. Chu Tian slightly knit his brows. Bring me to take a look. Clark brought Chu Tian to an open-air temple in Green City. This was one of the places where the green protectors were cultivated. There were several hundred green protector seedlings that were currently growing under the light of the green altar. Other than that, there were several hundred giant green protectors that had been moved here. They were all complete, but they could no longer be used. The green protector was a very powerful synthetic life form. It was created by the gnomes from the ancient war trees and was controlled by the green religion's priests. Could be considered one of the gnomes' greatest inventions. Each green protector could be used for 1,000 years. When Green City was at its peak 200-300 years ago, there were around 20,000 green protectors, which was enough to cover the entire territory, making it impossible for outsiders to invade. Now, there were less than 3,000 green protectors and 2,000 of them were sick, otherwise how could the shamans have this much courage? There was a spring of life in the center of the temple. This was not normal spring of life, it was something that the green religion priests had blessed and refined with the power of nature. Each drop was equivalent to a barrel of spring of life, so it was definitely a priceless treasure that had a very good effect on recovering injuries. These green protectors with strange diseases were now in a bad state. They were like dying trees with withered leaves. Although the gnomes did not hesitate to use the extremely pure spring of life to water them, they could only slow down the speed at which they withered, not showing any signs of turning around. Sir Clark, why did you bring a human here? This is my clan's important place and it hides our clan's secrets. How can we let a human spy on us? No matter where he went, he wouldn't be welcomed as a human. The gnome priests all looked at him with hostile eyes. Chu Tian was too lazy to care about them as he used his divine sense to quickly enter the green protector's body. He could vaguely feel that the green protector was filled with a strange energy, and it was this energy that was suppressing the green protector's vitality like a seal. Clark comforted the other gnomes, telling them to calm down. Since there was no hope, why not let this fellow try? The gnomes were very knowledgeable. If any gnome priest was placed in the human world, they would at least be great scholars or even scholars with the title of Kingdom Scholar. At least in this forest, there were few groups more knowledgeable than the gnomes. If all of this intelligence gathered together could not solve this problem, perhaps they would have to invite a sage to solve it. Moreover, it had to be a sage specializing in plants and life. Such a young human, how could he be a human-titled sage? The gnome's eyes were filled with disdain and disdain. Chu Tian took back his hand. This is a kind of death energy forming a slow-acting curse. I think it was done by the Lich, this fits their style. Dolores asked in a curious voice, is there a way to cure them? There is, but normal methods would require a lot of effort because these life forms have been deeply corroded by the curse. I'm afraid they won't be able to recover in a short period of time, so they won't be able to make it in time for this battle. Chu Tian hesitated for a few minutes before taking out a small bottle that was filled with a dark red liquid. He gave the bottle to Dolores. Pour this into the water of life and then use the water of life to water them. The gnomes were all stunned. What did this human want to do? Dolores immediately wanted to do this, but she was stopped by several white-bearded gnomes. They looked at the fox girl and the human with wary eyes. One was a heretic and the other was a sly human, only the heavens knew what these two wanted to do. Clark gave a gentle cough. Let them try it, there's no better way anyways. Dolores glared at the gnomes before pouring the contents of the bottle into the water of life. Almost in an instant, the entire spring water was covered in a layer of dark red as a strange energy was added to it. Dolores could feel the energy inside, so she looked at it with a questioning gaze. Chu Tian nodded, pour it. she immediately poured the water onto the half-dead green protector. An unbelievable thing happened. The moment the light red droplet landed on the green protector's body, there was a sizzling sound. Wherever the water droplet touched, the gray color disappeared, and the place it touched was filled with vitality. Those withered leaves were instantly filled with vitality. The gnomes were all stunned. What was going on? This was completely incomprehensible. Chu Tian revealed a pained expression. The divine blood could break any curse, and this spring water from the spring of life could revive the green protectors, so naturally it would have a good effect. Chu Tian did not have much divine blood on him. This thing could be used to refine the divine blood-eaten corpses, so using it like this was a bit too extravagant. However, the effect was immediate. Before long, many of the green protectors would completely recover, and this new battle strength would be enough to stabilize the rear. Chapter 4:13. After the green protectors were watered, the dead wood quickly recovered and the leaves became greener than before. This terrifying recovery speed could be seen by the naked eye, and a pool of water of life could water 400-500 green protectors. The problem that the gnomes couldn't solve with a large amount of energy was solved by Chu Tian with a wave of his hand. Those green leaves were filled with vitality, and there were traces of blood that were hard to see with the naked eye on the surface of each leaf. It was like a pattern or an array that made the green protector release a special aura, as if it was stronger than before. The green religion priests quickly inspected them. Forest divinity above. The vitality of these green protectors has been doubled. Each green protector's regeneration, recovery, and strength have all been greatly increased. These puppet creatures that had been contaminated by unknown curses and energy, and were on the verge of death, now seem to have been baptized by a special energy, allowing their quality to improve by leaps and bounds. The green protectors could only be used for 1,000 years, but now the gnomes could no longer detect an upper limit to their lifespan. Unbelievable! Clark looked at Chu Tian. After the green religion priests strengthened the green protectors 100 years ago, they couldn't find a way to strengthen the green protectors, but you did it with a small bottle. Can you tell me what it is? As long as we can collect this thing, Green City's strength will increase greatly. Of course I can tell you, but I'm afraid you won't be able to collect it with your abilities. Chu Tian softly said, "This is the essence blood condensed by an ancient god before it died. The divine blood can break all curses, so it can quickly restore these life forms." The gnomes and the fox girl were shocked. What did he say? Did their ears make a mistake? Chu Tian shrugged his shoulders and explained, "The green protectors are life forms cultivated from the fragments of the ancient war trees, so they have the attributes of an ancient divine object. Therefore, they have a high absorption rate of the divine blood, resulting in some changes. Not only will these green protectors become stronger, they will also not be afraid of curses." Spiritual gods were legendary existences. How could Chu Tian even have this kind of thing? The most important thing was that this human had casually taken out such a precious thing to save a few normal puppet lives? This behavior was simply like embedding a top-grade crystal diamond in a latrine pit. It was too king extravagant. Dolores's eyes were almost shining. "You actually have such a divine item on you? That's nothing." Chu Tian casually waved his hand, but his heart was still aching. However, he believed in the principle of not regretting it if he gave it away. Since he chose to act cool, he would act cool to the end, so he waved his hand and said, "All right, you can place the healed green protectors near the necromancer temple and let them bask in the sunlight." These polluted and cursed green protectors were placed in front of the undead temple. Of course it was not as simple as basking in the sunlight. This could form a powerful deterrent effect on the necromancers. First, the curse and pollution of the necromancers were purified. This would definitely be a great shock to them. Second, these healed green protectors were placed here to send a message to the necromancers. That was that Green City already knew that it was them who caused the deaths of so many Green Protectors. Third, these Green Protectors were enough to crush the entire Necromancer Temple. The several dozen necromancers stationed here would not be able to escape. This was a psychological warning and deterrence to the necromancers. It was also equivalent to taking a hostage, making the troops they had secretly trained outside not make a move. This deterrent effect was enough to make the necromancers hesitate. Chu Tian just needed to calm the chaos as fast as possible, and the necromancers would not be able to react in time. There's still enough time. Chu Tian looked up at the cloudless sky. Let's take care of the last problem. I want to visit the Druids. Clark never thought that Chu Tian would have this kind of idea. The Druids will not give you face, they are all wild and unruly people. Ha ha ha, that's not certain. Green City's territory was very large. Accurately speaking, Green City was a mountain area. It would take half a day to travel from one side of Green City to another on a flying demon beast. Just Green City alone was 5-6 times the size of Southern Xia's Imperial City. Southern Xia's Imperial City had 7-8 million people, but Green City only had 1 million. Moreover, Green City was a three-dimensional structure, with many living areas and castles being built in the middle of the mountains. This was completely different from a flat human city, so Green City seemed to be one with nature. If one counted the natural city walls surrounding the mountain range, then Green City was over 200 times the size of Southern Xia's Imperial City. It was almost the size of half the Imperial region. This was only a city. Green City had a large mountain range, a wide lake, wild demon beasts, and hidden immortal herbs in a corner. In short, whether it was the diversity of life or the changes in the landscape, it was not strange at all in this special city. This was the southeast part of Green City, and the entire area was covered in a quiet and lush rainforest. There were many towering mountain peaks that were like heaven-supporting pillars surrounding the surroundings. Each pillar was covered in green plants that were arranged in a certain pattern, just like a natural array. In the depths of the rainforest, a shrine covered in moss stood in the middle of it. This was the Druids' temple. The Druids were a free power in the forest, not belonging to any power. The Druids' followers were very widespread, with elves, spirit beasts, and in some areas outside the Forest of Chaos, even humans believed in the Druids. Chu Tian brought Dolores and Clark through the rainforest to the temple. Roar! A warning roar came from the top of a tall rainforest tree to the side. A giant wolf was standing there, staring at the intruders with a pair of green eyes. This was a level 3 shadow wolf. It was said to be a terrifying killer in the forest, able to silently kill any prey. The Umbra demon wolf didn't attack. It looked at them with clear and intelligent eyes, and a human voice burst out from its huge, ferocious wolf mouth. The Druids don't welcome outsiders. If you dare to take another step forward, don't blame the Druids for being impolite. While speaking, there were already many Druids appearing all around. These Druids had turned into wild beasts. There were giant apes, giant bears, and earth dragons, all of which were very strong demon beasts. The most important thing was that these were not just wild beasts, they were wild beasts filled with intelligence. Their intelligence and the Druids' abilities made them stronger than normal wild demon beasts. Perhaps as long as they gave the order, the Druids would immediately tear the intruders to pieces. Dolores and Clark were on guard as the killing intent coming from their surroundings was real. The Druids were a wild and unruly group. They respected nature and doing as they pleased, doing everything according to their own rules, so it was hard for Green City's rules to restrict them. Even if they recognized acting City Lord Clark, the Druids would not show mercy. This group of Druids had a very strong strength. Although the Druids were very loose and closed off in terms of battle strength, they were even above the shaman sorcerers and necromancers. Chu Tian calmly said, "I'm here to see Prophet Yoda." The Umbra demon wolf suddenly leapt into the air, and its body emitted light as it strangely transformed into a human. When it landed on the ground, it had already turned into a valiant wolfman. It roared at Chu Tian with a cold, killing intent that made people's hairs stand on end. Dolores and Clark both revealed looks of vigilance. Chu Tian faced the wolfman druid with a mouth full of fangs, but he still acted as if nothing had happened. This was because he was clear that the people in the Divine Nature Temple would not know that Chu Tian had arrived. As expected, a low and deep voice came from inside. It's rare for a guest to visit the Druid Temple. Invite them in. Chu Tian did not even look at the aggressive wolf man druid and swaggered into the Divine Nature Temple. Clark and Dolores both hesitated for a few seconds before following behind Chu Tian. Hundreds of high-level druids in all directions turned back into their human forms. They all had murderous looks on their faces and were very unfriendly. How could these damned fellows dare to disturb the prophet? The Druid religion pursued nature and simplicity. Therefore, there were almost no decorations in the Druid temple. It was like a primitive and ancient house. There was only a huge statue of a goddess high up in the sky. It was the goddess of nature that the Druids believed in. Her huge wings were spread out to protect the throne in front of her, and on this simple throne sat a strange person. Chu Tian had never seen this race before. He was only a meter tall and had the green skin of a goblin. He also had the long ears of an elf and was full of wrinkles like a gnome. He looked like a mix of three races. He wore a simple robe and sat cross-legged with a long staff on his lap. His entire body was shrouded in a layer of mysterious aura. This was the legendary Druid Master Yoda? Dolores had never seen him before and had only heard of his name in rumors. Yoda was a prophet of the Forest of Chaos Druid religion. A druid with the title of prophet was equivalent to a bishop in a church, which was even higher than a high priest. No one in Green City had seen Yoda make a move before, but it was said that before he moved to Green City, Yoda had turned into a dragon and fought with an ancient vicious beast. What kind of terrifying creature was a dragon? If this rumor was true, then even the high priests of Green City added together would not be a match for Yoda. The most powerful part was not this. It was said that the Druid prophets were different from normal people and had the ability to communicate with spiritual gods to predict the future. If a large matter happened in the forest, as long as the prophet wanted to know, there was nothing that could be hidden from the prophet's eyes and ears. This was also why Clark was very afraid of the Druids. The Druids were relatively low-key, but the threat they posed to the Green religion and Green City was not below the shaman sorcerers and necromancers. Not to mention that they were a group of unruly fellows, so anyone with this kind of influence in their territory would not be safe. Prophet Yoda would not easily meet people. Clark had only met Yoda twice in the past 30 years. This was also why when he knew that Chu Tian wanted to visit the Druids, Clark tried to stop him. This was because it was completely useless. If he disturbed these sensitive Druids, it would attract unnecessary trouble. Who would have thought that Yoda would directly accept Chu Tian's request? This was something that no one had expected. Prophet Yoda opened his eyes. His head was very small, but his eyes were very large, just like a young animal. However, it was different from the innocent eyes of a small animal. Yoda's eyes were clear and sharp, as if he could see through everything. I'm called Chu Tian. I've admired the Druid religion for a long time. Being fortunate enough to meet the legendary Druid prophet, it truly isn't easy. Chu Tian did not avoid Yoda's sharp eyes at all, but since it's such a coincidence, how about Master Yoda read my fortune for me? Impudent! With these disrespectful words, all the surrounding Druids were filled with rage. The prophet had a very high position in the Druid religion, and every Druid grew up under the teachings of the prophet. This weak human actually dared to be this rude to Master Yoda. This was simply looking down on the Druid religion. This was unforgivable. Clark and Dolores' expressions changed. They never thought that Chu Tian would run to the Druid temple and make this kind of request to their prophet in front of all these Druids. Chapter 4:14. Yoda's clear and sharp eyes were as calm as a water mirror. There was not the slightest ripple or undercurrent. He gently waved his hand, and the surrounding druids all quieted down. Although there were some dissatisfied growls coming from their mouths, no one dared to make a move. "Young human, I can feel that you are different from the others," Prophet Yoda calmly said. "The druid prophets can indeed feel a trace of fate, but it's a pity that this ability is limited. The stronger the fate, the more complicated it is, and the harder it is to see. I can see the life of a worm, but I can't see the life of a giant dragon. As for you," Yoda's large eyes flashed with a trace of confusion, "forgive me for saying this, but although you are standing in front of me, I can't feel your fate at all. It's like you don't belong to this time and space. This is a feeling I have never experienced before." The legends were true? The druid prophets really had this kind of mysterious ability? Chu Tian had read about it in ancient books before. There were some ancient prophets in this world, and they had the innate talent to see things people couldn't see. Chu Tian was just trying it out, but Yoda's words shocked him. Could it be that this fellow could really see something? Fate is a river and we are all a speck of dust in it. Wherever we go, it is all arranged by fate. We follow the current and cannot resist it. When Yoda said this, he suddenly revealed an interested expression. There is a fish that has jumped into this river. Not only is it trying to change its direction, wherever it goes, all the specks of dust will deviate from their original path. I can feel that anyone who interacts with you will have their fate changed. Yoda's eyes fell onto Dolores and Clark before revealing an emotional expression. Green City situation is already unpredictable, all the lines are in chaos. This was certain. If Chu Tian did not appear, the young Miss, Yingying, Nangong, and everyone else would have followed their original path. Chu Tian's appearance had changed history, so Yoda's words were correct. Chu Tian was a little surprised. Was there really someone in this world who could see through fate? Yoda's words reminded Chu Tian of the ancient god sealed in the Central State's Tower of Trials. They also compared fate to a river. The more powerful one was, the more they could control their direction and position. However, even the most powerful person could not change the direction of the river of fate. Clark and Dolores were secretly shocked. This druid prophet was even more profound than they had imagined. The most important thing was that the prophet's evaluation of Chu Tian was very profound. Even if a giant dragon was in front of him, even if Yoda could not accurately calculate its fate, he could feel the strength of its fate. He had no ability to pry into Chu Tian at all. The fate of all living beings in this world was actually a series of interconnected threads. When an unpredictable power interfered, it was bound to cause chaos in these threads. Even the druid prophets would temporarily lose their ability to prophesy. This young human was indeed different from the others. Perhaps this was the reason why Prophet Yoda wanted to see him. Chu Tian gave a sigh. Since I can't calculate it, then I won't. Actually knowing my own fate is quite boring. Isn't life always full of surprises? Prophet Yoda smiled. Mr. is very open-minded. You've come to the Druid Temple. What advice do you have for the Druids? I don't dare give advice. Chu Tian did not keep them in suspense and directly threw out the chip he had thought of. I've heard that before Prophet Yoda brought the Druids to Green City, they had fought with a terrifying ancient fierce beast. Prophet Yoda's injuries have not healed yet. Yoda did not reply. But this was indeed the case. The Druids did not come here with a special purpose. It was just the gnomes' prejudice against the Druids. Yoda's strength at his peak could be considered a first-class expert in the Forest of Chaos, but after the battle with the fierce beast, his strength had fallen quite a bit. Of course, even if he wasn't as strong as before, Prophet Yoda was still comparable to the high priests of the large sections. Chu Tian did not keep them in suspense. I am the new city lord of Green City, and admire the Druid culture. I can think of a way to cure the prophet's injuries, but I hope that the Druids can ally with Green City. The other Druids' faces fell. He could cure the Prophet's injuries? If it was like this, then this was a large matter. Prophet Yoda did not lose his composure at all, even his eyes did not change. It was like this had nothing to do with him. Each Druid is free, I have no right to make a decision for the Druids. Chu Tian knit his brows. Why did this fellow not know what was good for him? Chu Tian lowered his request. I can give the Prophet an effective cure, but I don't want the Druids to be involved in the battle between Green City and the shamans. Yoda calmly said, the Druids love peace and will never be involved in a fight. As long as others do not look at us with hostility, we will not look at others with hostility. Alright. Then it's a deal. Chu Tian was in a hurry, so he did not want to bargain with this prophet. As long as he promised not to be involved in this conflict, everything else was fine. Chu Tian was quite at ease with the Druids. The people of this sect were quite simple, and they believed in the god of nature and the god of Druid. The Druids did not have any lies or hypocrisy, and they would not participate in the power struggle. Chu Tian coming to the Druid temple to visit the Prophet was just insurance. Since the Prophet had personally promised something, Chu Tian believed the Druids could do it. When Chu Tian left with the gnomes and fox girls, Yoda closed his large bright eyes. His brows wrinkled even deeper as he fell into silence. The Druids looked at each other in blank dismay. They knew that when the Prophet did this, he must be thinking about something. Suddenly, Prophet Yoda suddenly raised his hand and his source spirit was released. Yoda's source spirit was very strange, it was actually a turtle shell. It was the kind of turtle shell used for sacrifices and divination. The Druids all knelt down on one knee seeing this. They all understood that the Prophet was going to make another prophecy. The surrounding Druid altars all poured some kind of energy into the turtle shell, causing words to appear on the surface of the turtle shell. This was the Druid Prophet's prophecy. Only, before the words appeared, the entire turtle shell began to crack and the cracks quickly covered the entire shell. With a thunderous sound, the entire turtle shell shattered into pieces. Pooh! Yoda spat out a mouthful of blood. Ah! Sir Prophet! The Druids quickly went up to support him, but Yoda waved his hand. He looked very weak, but there was no danger to his life. It really wasn't good. As long as he was beside this human, any divination or deduction abilities would lose their effect. He already had no way of predicting anything in Green City. All the threads here were tangled together and constantly changing, causing the other threads outside to change as well. Only when they were far enough away would they be able to regain this ability. Yoda revealed a strange and complex expression. Was there really a person in this world that could disturb fate? Chu Tian had used less than 2 days and everything had been arranged. Now he just had to wait for the shaman army and the local army to move. Around the 3rd day, the local army had reached around 230,000 people, and they were all male elites from large tribes. This was already an army that could threaten the gnomes. The locals did not have any patience, and now they did not want to wait any longer. Kill! 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 Over 200,000 people gathered in the forest, covering an area of over 10 miles. They were filled with wild killing intent and roars, just like a landslide, causing the birds and beasts in the forest to scatter. Several large tribe chiefs took the lead and decided to lead their subordinates into Green City to plunder. Several shaman sorcerers in the army used various witchcraft techniques on these people. For example, the berserk technique, bloodthirsty technique, and etc. When these local warriors were buffed by the various witchcraft techniques of the shaman priests, their battle strength naturally increased. Everything was in place. Green City is in front of us. Let us kill our way in and overthrow those weak gnomes. The local army could not wait any longer. Like a tide, they charged towards Green City. Green City's passages were filled with barriers and green protectors, but the shaman religion had already promised that as long as the local army attacked, the shaman sorcerers would close the defenses from the inside. Several 100,000 locals would be able to kill their way into Green City. The gnomes' battle strength was not that strong, so these several 100,000 would make them retreat. Not to mention that there was another group of shaman followers attacking at the same time, so there was hope of destroying Green City. Just when a dozen tribal chiefs led a tide of clansmen into the canyon, they suddenly found that all the barriers in the canyon had been opened, layer by layer, like a huge barrier. The two cliffs were filled with half-elf archers and half-elf priests. What's going on? Didn't the shamans say that they could close the gnomes' defenses? Although they were very dissatisfied with the current situation, they had already charged in. Even if Green City's defenses were not closed, they could only brace themselves and continue fighting. Who would have thought that when the locals were circulating their spirit energy to fight? Something that no one would have thought would happen. The locals had just begun circulating their spirit energy when it felt like their bodies were burning. All of their spirit energy went wild in their meridians and they could not control it at all. What is going on? Damn, we've been poisoned. Everyone has been poisoned. What is going on here? The locals were shocked to find that almost all of their main forces had been poisoned. Before they could react, the Minotaur chief Arnold suddenly gave a roar and his giant axe slashed down on a shaman priest. With a voila sound, the shaman priest was like a broken porcelain vase, instantly exploding into pieces of flesh and blood that filled the sky. The locals finally understood why everyone had been poisoned when they saw this. It was because the Minotaurs had done something to their food. The Minotaurs were a member of the locals, and the other tribes were not on guard against the Minotaurs at all. They never would have thought that the Minotaurs would poison their food. Chapter 4:15. Arnold smashed a shaman priest to pieces. This was just the beginning, or rather it was an order, but the Minotaurs were filled with rage. These 3-4 meter tall monsters had red eyes as they gasped for breath. They all brandished their axes and giant hammers as they surrounded the shaman priests, making the expressions of the shaman priests fall. You dare attack the shaman priests? The shaman god will not let you go. The shaman god will use the most vicious curse to make you wish you were dead. The goat tribe shaman gave a mournful roar. This kind of threat was completely useless against the enraged Minotaurs. The shaman priests were very strong, but there were only 5 shaman priests and there were 5,000 Minotaurs. This was a battle without any suspense. The shaman priests weren't strong in close combat, and with the large group of Minotaurs charging at them, they didn't even have the strength to resist. The shaman that had been threatening the Minotaurs a moment ago was instantly trampled into a pile of flesh and blood. Not even his original appearance could be seen. Arnold. The other locals all had ugly expressions. There was a chief who couldn't help angrily shouting, "You shameless traitor, actually betraying the forest's allies. You won't have a good death. Idiots." Arnold's large bull face revealed a taunting expression. You don't even know that you've been used by others. Father is saving you, so it's fine if you want to die, but do you want to drag all the surrounding tribes down with you? The chief angrily roared, "What did you say? I have concrete information and evidence. Everything is the doing of the shamans." Arnold took out a broken banner. "This is something I found in the forest. There is a witchcraft and demonic technique attached to it. The shaman sorcerers have reduced their prey, it's all a scheme." Arnold suddenly jumped onto a tall rock. "These despicable fellows want to use us as cannon fodder to attack Green City. There are many of you that have been controlled by the shaman priest's witchcraft, but you fools don't even know it." The Minotaur's loud voice reverberated through the valley, making the locals speechless with stunned looks. At this time, the barrier was removed and a gnome army entered the valley. "This Minotaur chief is right," the leading Green religion priest loudly shouted. 3 days ago, the Green City envoys were affected by the shaman religion's witchcraft. We have already investigated this. This conflict was purely instigated by shaman, so we have reason to believe that some of you are under shaman's control. Arnold ordered the Minotaurs to capture the chiefs and high-level leaders of the tribes. What are you doing? Release our leader. The Green Religion priest looked at Arnold. Arnold said without a doubt, as far as I can see, these are the people. The Green Religion priests took out talismans and placed them on the chiefs and high-level leaders. When the talismans were activated, most people gave pitiful cries. Some people spat out insect eggs from their stomachs, and there were several chiefs who had insects coming out of their orifices. This scene shocked everyone. What is this? The natives were all given a fright. Shaman witchcraft is extremely sinister and vicious. It can take a life at any time and can also control one's thoughts. These settlement chiefs were being controlled by witchcraft, but sometimes they didn't even realize it. I think you should be awake by now. When the witchcraft was dispelled, although they suffered heavy injuries, there was no danger to their lives. The expressions of these native leaders became more and more unsightly. When they thought about how some of the thoughts and emotions that had arisen during this period of time were indeed very strange. They did not appear on their own at all, but were forcefully stuffed into their brains by some kind of power. Then, they saw these bugs that had crawled out of their bodies. So it was like this, so it was like this. No wonder they became this crazy. No wonder they lost their reason. No wonder the local powers could gather so quickly. Actually, a person with a bit of a calm head would not have made the decision to attack Green City. Even if the Green City gnomes were weak, they were not something these local powers could resist. This kind of battle was equivalent to sending themselves to death. Arnold loudly shouted, "This disaster is all the fault of the shamans. They did not hesitate to create famine and chaos, causing our people to suffer heavy losses. Now they are leading us to attack Green City, using us as cannon fodder. How can there be such a thing in this world? I say, blood for blood, a tooth for a tooth. Let the shamans taste the anger of the forest." The locals realized that they had been tricked and they all angrily roared out. Green City is willing to work together with the forest tribes to fight the evil shamans. A Green Religion priest promised, "We will use the name of the forest god to say that as long as the brave tribes stop their horses at the edge of the cliff and stand on Green City's side to fight the shamans. Not only will Green City not pursue any responsibility, we will also provide you with enough food to let you pass through this dangerous period." The priests swore in the name of the god they believed in. This kind of oath was reliable and the locals did not have any worries. What are you still hesitating for? Arnold's large nostrils let out 2 white breaths. The evil shamans have harmed many Minotaur clansmen, so the Minotaurs will take revenge for our clansmen. Even if they were slow, they should have thought it through. This was why the moment the crisis erupted, the shamans appeared in the various tribes. Not only did they encourage the tribes to work together, they were even willing to help the locals fight. It turned out that all of this had been arranged beforehand. These forest tribes and chiefs had been toyed with in the palms of their hands. The locals were filled with rage. The poison the locals were poisoned with was not fatal. This was just losing their spirit energy for an hour. Most of them would quickly recover their battle strength. "Kill the shamans! Kill the shamans!" The angry chiefs responded one by one, which spread to all the forest locals. When the gnomes saw this, they immediately opened the barrier. The large group of locals were like flowing water as they wildly charged into Green City. High Priest Mars in the Shaman Temple felt the sky shaking shouts. The locals are killing their way in this quickly? Green City's attention has been attracted by the locals. Even if a portion of them are attracted, the shaman religion will have a chance. An army of several 100,000 plus the several dozen priests and 2,000 voodoo puppets in the temple. I don't believe we can't take down a trivial Green City. But at this time, a large wave of flame arrows flew at the shaman temple, piercing into the walls, tables, and even statues. The flames immediately ignited the surrounding objects. High Priest Mars' face sunk. The gnomes dare make a move before us? Go! Release the voodoo puppets and let them see the might of the shamans. The voodoo puppets charged out of the shaman temple like meteors. At this time, there were several thousand gnome archers and soldiers with 10 green protectors surrounding this place, wildly attacking the shaman temple. They suddenly saw a large group of sharp shadows charge out, and each one was covered in curse and witchcraft energy. The expressions of the green religion priests changed when they saw this. Be careful! These are the shaman religion's voodoo puppets. The archery skills of the half-elf archers were not much inferior to the elves. After spirit energy was poured into the arrows, only a flash of arrow light could be seen. The arrows were strangely fast and incomparably sharp. Several of the wizard puppets at the front were instantly sliced apart by the light. The voodoo puppets are only like this. When the gnomes were a bit careless, the voodoo puppets that were torn apart suddenly turned into poisonous insects that covered the sky like a small dark cloud. They instantly reformed in the middle of the gnome archers, turning back into the voodoo puppets and looking like they were not injured at all. The voodoo puppets were puppets that the shaman priests had spent a large amount of resources to refine. Their bodies were filled with curse and witchcraft energy, and before their energy was used up, they had almost immortal bodies. A gnome gave a pitiful cry. The voodoo puppet raised it into the air with a single hand, and its body began to wither at a speed visible to the naked eye. Then it inflated like a balloon, and with an explosive sound, countless poisonous insects and poison shot out from its body. The surrounding gnomes were not spared. Too terrifying! The witchcraft and curses on these monsters were too strong. Marzu walked out of the temple with a group of shaman priests. His white hair fluttered in the wind, and his skinny face looked like a gloomy skeleton. You fools from the green religion, if you want to attack the shaman temple, you won't be able to do it with just these few people. The shaman priests controlled the voodoo puppet. The battle strength of 2,000 voodoo puppets was enough to destroy an army. These gnomes were the elites of their race, but it was impossible for them to block the shaman's attack. Since you've sent yourselves to me, this old man won't be polite. Mars decided to first destroy the elites in front of him, and then bring the voodoo puppet army to destroy the gnome castle. Kill them all! Quickly retreat! Quickly retreat! The gnomes were forced to retreat in a sorry state. The green protectors created a defensive barrier to cover their retreat. These few green protectors were of no use, so the shaman priests controlled the voodoo puppets to attack. Not long later, they broke through the big sister green protector and quickly chased after the escaping gnomes. Mars' face was filled with taunting and ridicule, but this expression did not last long. Because the gnomes had retreated into the middle of the large group of green religion priests, Mars' cheeks twitched a few times. He suddenly remembered that in the battle just now, the gnomes did not use the power of the green religion priests. There was only one possibility: they were pretending to be defeated to lure the enemy in. Come back! As soon as Mars gave the order, the green religion priests made a move before the shaman priest. There were no vines flying in the sky or summoned tree demons. There was only an incomparably large source energy array being activated by the green religion priest. This source energy array was something the shaman priests had never seen before, but what made the shaman priests incomparably shocked was that the witch puppet lost its balance as soon as it entered the source energy array, not even being able to stand properly. Following that, its skin and bones fell like mud, and those insects came out of its body with a sharp cry, as if they wanted to escape. However, when they fell to the ground, they did not even have time to struggle before they died. Almost in an instant, this large-scale source energy array killed several hundred voodoo puppets. This was enough to cause an incomparably large shock to the shaman priests. Chapter 4:16. Chu Tian stood far away on the hill, watching the situation unfold. The 20,000 gnome elites had already surrounded the shaman temple. Not even a drop of water could trickle through. The array you gave the gnomes is too strong. Dolores's eyes almost popped out of their sockets when she saw hundreds of shaman puppets being disintegrated by the array. These shamans are completely useless after meeting you. I'm really curious. It's your first time coming into contact with shamans. How can you break their witchcraft? The difference in our culture is not small, so it's hard for me to explain this. Just treat me as a genius who can predict the future. Ha ha ha. If the other side was Ying, seeing Chu Tian's insolent appearance, she would have flipped out. Even if it was the young miss, she would have given him a fierce look. All right, my genius city lord. Dolores was not angry at all. Rather, she walked over to Chu Tian and massaged his shoulders. She used a charming voice to ask, I'm really curious. Just tell me, all right? I'm begging you. The fox girl's full body rubbed against him, intentionally or unintentionally. Her breath smelled like orchids and her devilish voice entered his ears. There weren't many people in this world that could endure it. How could Chu Tian not know what this fox girl was thinking? The shaman religion was a very strong religion, not only in the savage highlands and Green City, they also had a strong influence in many areas of the Forest of Chaos, suppressing the demonic god religion for many years. If she could obtain the method to deal with the shamans from Chu Tian, would she need to be afraid of these sinister and damned shamans in the future? Actually, witchcraft is a variation of an ancient technique. It is just a small trick in the end. It doesn't have the essence. As long as you can find a way to break it, any witchcraft can be destroyed. Chu Tian said halfway, as for the specific method, I can't reveal it for now. You can just work for me in the future, you can naturally learn anything you want. How could Dolores be satisfied with this kind of perfunctory answer? When Dolores was prepared to use the Fox clan's charm technique to interrogate this fellow, there were suddenly shouts coming from a direction. Northwest direction. It should be the shaman believers attacking. However, they never thought that the gnomes would resist so fiercely. This was because the locals on the other side did not have any effect on the gnomes. The gnomes' defenses were focused on the shamans, so it was impossible for the shamans to attack. Arnold and the other forest locals might even use the gnomes to deal with the shaman believers after learning the truth, so this should not be a problem. As for variables, the necromancer temple was under control. The druids would definitely not interfere in the situation. If these two shaman factions didn't participate, then the other churches and forest factions wouldn't have the guts to fish in troubled waters. The only variable now was the shaman temple. After all, there were over 1,000 shaman sorcerers in the shaman temple, and there were close to 100 shaman sorcerers with the title of priest. Adding the Wu puppet, it was a very terrifying force. If it played a role at a critical moment, it could still turn the tide of the battle to a certain extent. But unfortunately, the shaman sorcerer's most advantageous puppet could not play any role at all. These voodoo puppets were very high-level witchcraft crystals. Each puppet needed a large amount of time, resources, and energy to be refined. The Wu puppet's battle strength was around the 8-9th awakened soul layer, but its witchcraft curses were enough to kill a true spirit cultivator. The 2,000 voodoo puppets were the accumulation of the Green Country shamans over several generations. Just like how the Green Protectors were important to the gnomes, the voodoo puppets were the foundation of the shamans. Not to mention outsiders, even the shamans themselves did not know what fatal weakness the voodoo puppets had. Before these monsters ran out of energy, they could be reborn again and again. If the shaman priests were to assist them in battle, they would be able to replenish the strength of the Wu puppets in time. Up until now, there was no known effective method that could restrain these troublesome fellows. The actual combat strength of these 2,000 Wu puppets was definitely not inferior to an army of 100,000. It was because they had absolute confidence in the Wu puppets that the shaman sorcerers did not station an army in the shaman temple. Now that they were surrounded by the gnomes, their faces turned incomparably dark, and they did not know what to do. The shaman religion's perfect voodoo puppets had been easily broken by the gnomes. This was undoubtedly a heavy blow. The shaman religion had no other choice. They could only call back the Wu puppets and prepare to defend the temple. The shaman temple had quite a few enchantments and witchcraft techniques, as well as the altar. If they relied on the shaman temple to defend, the gnomes would not be able to break in so easily. Stop them! Use the shaman breaking talisman arrows! The gnomes clearly understood the shaman sorcerer's plan. The archers in front pulled out arrows covered in talismans, and when the arrows left their hands, their spirit energy would activate the talisman. Each arrow contained the power of the shaman breaking talisman. When the Wu puppets were hit by the gnomes' arrows, they immediately let out pitiful cries. Their bodies began to fall like building blocks, finally turning into rotten meat and worms on the ground. There was no need to say. This was also Chu Tian's masterpiece. After Chu Tian taught the shaman witchcraft talisman arrays to the gnomes had created these talisman arrows to deal with the shaman sorcerers. Once the source energy array on the talisman was activated and the arrows were shot into the Wu puppet's body, the talisman energy would cut off the witchcraft connection on the Wu puppet. The Wu puppet would suffer a backlash from the curse power and turn into minced meat, without any way to recover. Like this, the shaman sorcerers had been completely countered. Damn! Marzu was filled with rage as he muttered some words. The corpses of the gnomes he had killed earlier all gathered above his head, as if they had lost gravity. Countless limbs wrapped around each other, like a giant invisible hand rolling dough into a ball, instantly turning it into a several-meter-wide meatball. Clark's expression slightly changed when he saw this. Be careful. He is using a high-level shaman witchcraft. The meatball floating above Marzu's head gradually turned red before turning purple. Large amounts of poison seeped out and the meatball inflated like it was filled with air. Finally it was thrown into the gnome area. Clark raised the long staff with both hands and a green light was released. Great forest god, please bestow me strength. After saying this, the long staff was inserted into the ground and countless branches and vines came out, locking down the meatball in the air like chains. These vines were filled with the green religion priest's power, so even if it was cut by wind blades, burned by flames, or smashed by giant rocks, they would not be able to harm it at all. However, they could only temporarily stop this terrifying witchcraft. Originally, when the green vines touched the meatball, they immediately released the curse power and quickly withered. At this time, the meatball was already riddled with holes and large amounts of poison gas was being released from inside. There were cracks on the surface of the meatball, and it was clear it was about to explode. Hong! The moment the gigantic meatball exploded, it was like a mighty sandstorm. Countless tiny pieces of meat splattered forward. Every piece of meat contained a witchcraft curse. As long as it splashed onto any living creature, it would instantly fester and die. Forest barrier. Clark was already prepared and suddenly summoned a giant green barrier in front of him. Almost instantly, the green barrier was covered in a layer of dark red. Other than the countless pieces of meat, there were also large amounts of disgusting witchcraft insects that were swimming around the barrier. The meatball exploded and all the plants within several hundred meters were contaminated. At a speed visible to the naked eye, the poison gas that spread out formed a barrier, making it impossible for the gnomes to chase after them. Wherever it went, all the plants would wither and there would be all kinds of dangerous witchcraft insects crawling over them. So powerful! Dolores saw this scene from afar, truly worthy of being the shaman's high priest. If this attack had landed in a densely packed area, perhaps it would have killed over 1,000 people. Chu Tian was also a bit surprised. This shaman sorcerer from the savage highlands did have some skill. His cultivation was not lower than the 4th true spirit layer. Because witchcraft was too hard to deal with, normal cultivators of the same level would find it hard to fight him. Mars' attack created a world for the shamans, and all the shamans immediately retreated into the temple. The green religion priests all made their move. Countless vines and grass were injected with energy, and they wildly grew like they were alive. They were like thick pythons that charged forward to attack, but they were still a step too late. The sorcerers had already retreated, and the entrance to the shaman temple was protected by a barrier. The green religion priests could not directly cut it open, so the countless vines could only wrap around the altar, not letting the people inside come out. Mars, your scheme has been completely exposed. Clark loudly shouted. Don't needlessly prick us, you won't have another chance. The shaman sorcerers were trapped in the temple. Their faces were all like dead ashes. Even if they reacted slowly now, they would still understand what was going on. The shaman witchcraft had been broken by the gnomes, so the shaman's plan could not be carried out. The shamans were trapped in the shaman temple, and although they could rely on the temple's power to protect themselves, how could they stay here forever? The witchcraft that Mars had just cast was extremely powerful, but it had obviously consumed a lot of energy as well. At this moment, he was panting heavily, and his eyes were filled with frustration and anger. Hateful half-elf, hateful Clark. If I catch him, I'll torture him to death bit by bit with 10,000 wizard Gus. A green-skinned orc priest came over. High priest, the green religion priests have already sealed the temple, and we can't use witchcraft on the outside. What should we do now? Since it's like this, we can't just sit here and wait for death. Mars said with a dark expression. First use the altar to recover our strength, and then we'll kill our way out. We'll let them understand that the shaman sorcerers are not easy to deal with. Luz, you'll lead the charge later and I'll cover for you. Luz thought about it for a few seconds. I have an idea that might be more beneficial to our situation. Mars looked at his assistant. Tell me about it. We can. Luz walked to Mars's side and prepared to continue speaking. A colorful large centipede came out of his sleeve and shot out like an arrow, biting the old troll's neck. Kill you and then take your head to Green City. Mars gave a pitiful cry. This centipede was a wizard insect that Luz had refined for many years. Even if it was an earth dragon that was bitten by it, the poison inside would instantly cause it to fester. Chapter 4:17. Mars's cultivation was above Luz's, so this kind of sneak attack would not work normally. But Marzu had consumed a large amount of energy and was not on guard against Luz, so Luz's sneak attack was successful. Luz was a fierce and decisive person. Since he had decided to kill the high priest, of course he would not show any mercy. The seven-tailed centipede he had refined could kill anyone here in a single bite, but it could not kill this fellow in front of him. When the centipede bit Marzu, Luz's palm struck out, slamming into Marzu's chest. Although the shaman sorcerers could not cultivate normal cultivation techniques, with Luz's true spirit realm cultivation, just releasing his spirit energy was enough to create a very strong destructive might. Mars's ribs shattered and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. Like a broken glass person, he was instantly sent flying, slamming into an altar and causing the altar to cave in. High Priest. The shaman sorcerers' faces fell as they stared at Luz, who had sneak attacked Marzu. The shaman priests by Luz's side stood up, looking like they were blocking these sorcerers for Luz. A shaman priest roared out with a face filled with anger and confusion, "We're facing a great enemy, what do you mean by this?" "What do I mean? I want to ask him what Marzu means." Luz walked forward with a dark expression. None of the shamans dared block him. Attack Green City? This is a method of mutual destruction, but you want us to jump into a pit of fire. Even if we win, what meaning does a ruined Green City have to us? Even if we win, can we withstand the anger of the Eternal Forest? The savage highlands are merely treating us as dispensable chess pieces. Could it be that you're willing to be manipulated like this? The shaman sorcerers had ugly expressions on their faces. Luz shouted, I have already discussed the conditions with the new Green City Lord. As long as we leave the savage highlands, the shamans can still live here and we will receive Green City's protection. Perhaps our influence will greatly decrease, but at least we will be free. The shaman religion was split into two factions. One was the highland shamans represented by Mars and the other was the green country shamans represented by Luz. The two sides were in a standoff. Jia jia jia. A human figure came out of the hole in the altar. He had a head of white hair and was covered in blood, looking like a terrifying demon. His skin was festering and there was poisonous blood flowing out. It was clear that he was deeply poisoned. What a good traitor who betrays his master for glory. Without a religion, where would the green country shamans come from? Today I'll kill you, a traitor, and clean up the sect. The priest beside Luz paled. This old fellow had been hit by Luz's seven-tailed centipede, and had taken 2 full force palms from Luz without any defense, and still hadn't died. The high priestess seemed to be more powerful than most people had imagined. Marzu saw Luz's ugly expression and immediately laughed wildly. Surprised? You haven't learned all the techniques of the highland shamans. During the conversation, Mars spat out a few bugs. Each one was round like a blood-sucking leech, but at this moment, they were motionless. Their bodies were bruised and black, emitting poisonous gas. Not long after, they turned into a pool of poisonous blood, corroding a large piece of the sturdy floor. The other shaman sorcerers instantly understood. The high priestess had placed a witchcraft spell in his body, and these parasites were in his body. When Luz's seven-tailed centipede bit the high priestess, these parasites had absorbed most of the curse and poison. Therefore, although the high priestess' injuries were not light, they were not fatal. Luz felt this was bad, but he would not collapse. Luz was very clear on the strength of his seven-tailed centipede. Although the high priestess had dissolved most of the poison with witchcraft, there was still a small portion remaining in his body. Adding in the injuries from Marzu's 2 palms, he would not be able to recover so easily. Then let me experience the witchcraft of the highland shamans. Luz's source spirit was completely released, and it was gray in color. After it condensed, it turned into a fierce-looking puppet. This puppet had small eyes and a mouth that reached the back of its ears. There were insects drilling into its 7 orifices, making it look very fierce and terrifying. Each shaman source spirit was like this. This was similar to the members of the giant shark gang in southern Xia. When the giant shark gang received the baptism of the sea race's inheritance, their source spirits would turn into giant sharks. When a shaman sorcerer turned into a shaman sorcerer, their source spirit would also change. It was this kind of sorcerer puppet. The shaman priest's witchcraft power came from this source spirit puppet. Mars also released a sorcerer puppet. His source spirit was clearly stronger, and the sorcerer puppet instantly shot out a tooth from its finger. This tooth was not big and looked like a human tooth. The surface of the tooth was covered in witchcraft runes, and the sorcerer puppet's power shot out. One could only see an almost invisible gray shadow. The tooth contained a fatal witchcraft power, and Luz quickly dodged to the side. A shaman sorcerer standing in a straight line was hit instead of him, but it was like a drop of water falling on his body. The tooth actually disappeared without a trace. Almost in the next second, the shaman gave a pitiful cry. He spat out a large mouthful of blood from his mouth. It was more accurate to say he didn't spit, but rather escape. Most of the blood in his body came out from his mouth, eyes, and nostrils. His eyeballs, brain, heart, and organs all turned into fragments. This shaman sorcerer instantly turned into a dried-up corpse as he fell to the ground. Luz's sleeve shook a few times and 6-7 beetles came out of his palm, finally forming a small ball the size of half a fist. This time it was Marzu's turn to quickly dodge. The insect ball Luz threw hit the wall and exploded. The entire shaman temple shook a few times, and the insect ball sprayed out a large amount of blood, leaving a giant mark on the wall. "It's only SOSO." Marza gave a cold laugh. Luz's witchcraft was only inferior to Marzu's, but his cultivation base was too far apart. This was not something that could be easily dealt with. Marzu believed he had at least a 70% chance of winning. There was no time. The seven-tailed centipede's poison was still spreading in his body. After Marza suppressed the poison, his face became darker and darker. The priest robes on his body began to tremble without any wind, and a strong witchcraft energy leaked out of his source spirit's 7 orifices, revolving around his body like a whirlwind. Everyone could feel Marzu's intentions. He decided to use his witchcraft to take care of Luz once and for all. But at this time, something that no one could have imagined happened. A vine suddenly pierced through the wall and instantly pierced through Marza's back, coming out of his chest. The blood-stained vine continued to pierce through a pillar, and his heart and lungs were instantly torn apart. Marzu was thrown into the air by a strong force. His eyes were wide open and his face was filled with disbelief. How was this possible? How could the temple be so easily broken? When Marzu saw that the vine had pierced through the wall, it was right in the middle of Luz's insect ball that had exploded. He suddenly understood something. The insect ball's target, perhaps it was not him. The blood that sprayed out contained a large amount of witchcraft energy. It was like a strong acid splashing onto the wall, quickly melting the temple's wall and finally creating a large hole. At the same time, it weakened the defenses of the temple from the inside. The gnomes' vines had already turned the temple into a large dumpling, and they could definitely feel the defenses of this area weakening. Clark had directly cut through the wall and killed the troublesome Marzu with a single attack. "Don't think you'll have an easy time even if I die. You'll all be buried with me." Marzu's tall figure moved a few times and his gray hair suddenly turned scarlet red. His skin was covered in small bumps, like there were many insects moving in his body. Moreover, there were more and more of them as they swelled up. In just a few seconds, he had turned into a balloon filled with air. "This is bad. He's going to self-destruct. Quickly run." The shaman sorcerers cried out in fear as they all ran. Marzu's body released a thunderous sound and the entire hall was covered in a layer of blood red. This was the power of Marzu's witchcraft energy, and it contained a strong curse power. Some of the slower shaman sorcerers were hit by a bit. Their bodies immediately went out of control as they swelled up like Marzu. Then they exploded like balloons, turning into a large wave of blood-red energy. This energy landed on other people's bodies and caused a large explosion. This was already no longer self-destructing. Marza had used one person to self-destruct to cause several dozen people to explode. If this move was used in the center of the city, where there were many people, perhaps the entire city would be turned into a land of death in a matter of minutes. Luz had just escaped with a small portion of the shaman sorcerers when the temple was already a sea of blood. Clark immediately raised his hand when he saw this. "Quickly seal the shaman temple, don't let this power leak out." The green religion priests all made a move. Vines stacked on top of each other, finally forming a giant semicircle on the ground. The vines stacked on top of each other was several feet thick and contained a powerful sealing power. Even if there was a strong explosion inside, this power would not leak out even a bit. Powerful, truly powerful. Dolores patted her full chest. "That old thing is truly sinister. It's a good thing we didn't participate in the battle, otherwise we would have suffered a large loss. The shaman high priest is dead and the battle is over. Let's go over as well." When Chu Tian brought Dolores over, the gnomes had already begun to clean up the battlefield. Luz and the several dozen surviving shaman sorcerers had been captured by the gnomes, waiting to be dealt with. Luz saw Chu Tian and immediately shouted, "Sir City Lord, I've already done as you said." Chu Tian waved his hand at the gnomes, indicating for them to be released. The gnomes of course did not immediately do this and first asked Clark for his opinion. Clark also had no choice. The gnomes could easily win mainly because of Chu Tian, so he could only wave his hand, let them go. Chu Tian threw the antidote to Luz. You've made the right choice, now end this battle without any benefits. I think you don't want all the shaman believers to die in this chaos. Luz repeatedly nodded. This battle had already caused the shaman sorcerers heavy losses. If all of the shaman's followers died, without any new blood to replenish them, the shaman religion might really be unable to recover from this setback. This battle had no meaning. The shaman religion had already suffered a crushing defeat and there was no chance for them to make a comeback. Chapter 4:18. Green City was a forest city, and the difference between a city and a tribe was that a city was a relatively open place. There were free markets and different races, just like the large and small towns in the forest. But the city's management was stricter and more formal. Only merchant caravans or adventurers recognized by the city could come in. Green City had been managed by the gnomes for 500 years. Now there were many merchant caravans, races, and influences that had obtained residency, shop opening, and business permit. The forest city's main source of income was the taxes collected from commerce and residency. There was a large proportion of outsiders in Green City. This storm had caused an uproar in the city, so it was impossible for others not to know about it. In the tavern, the merchants, adventurers, and gnomes were all talking about this matter. "Hey, fellows, do you know?" A gnome merchant said in an exaggerated manner. "Green City almost had a large battle yesterday." Another forest merchant nodded. That's right. Green City is too damn unsafe. Can we still properly do business here in the future? It's said that the surrounding forest tribes are in chaos. I think Green City is in danger, so it's better to just leave. You can all be assured. A gnome in the tavern quickly explained. These merchant caravans were Green City's main source of income, so if they lost confidence in Green City, it would be a large loss to the gnomes. The crisis was caused by the shamans. Now that the shamans have been beaten half to death, they are no longer a threat. Another gnome said, Green City has already released food to the forest tribes, relieving the danger of famine for the various tribes. Although Green City has lost quite a bit of resources, I believe that after this, the surrounding forest tribes will be even more united. Even if there are enemies in the future, we will be able to unite against them. The forest merchants all had resentful looks on their faces. Who doesn't know that your Green City is already on the verge of collapse? Even if you can pass this time, can you pass next time? At this time, an adventurer who knew the inside story asked, That's right, I heard that the reason why Green City didn't suffer any large losses this time was because of the help of a mysterious human. Otherwise, Green City would have to pay a large price to pass this crisis. How could they be unharmed like now? Really? Where did this human come from? How could he be so powerful? Why haven't I heard of him before? A gnome scratched his head and said, My grandfather is a green religion priest and he's seen this human before. I think he's called Chu Tian? Anyway, it's a human who's not even 20 years old. This name was indeed unfamiliar to the forest tribes. No one had ever heard of this kind of person moving around in the forest, so they were very surprised that Chu Tian could solve this disaster for Green City. However, it was obvious that they were surprised a little too early. At this time, an adventurer charged into the tavern holding the notice given by the Green City gnomes. He had a strange look on his face as he loudly shouted, Damn, something big has happened. Come and take a look at this. Hanson, what the hell are you doing? Is another war about to break out? The tavern was filled with clattering sounds as the merchants all stood up and immediately took the notice in the adventurers' hands. They didn't know if they didn't look, but when they saw the contents, everyone's eyes almost popped out. What's written here? A person anxiously shouted, I don't know Elven language. Quickly read it out for me. This is the latest news. That human's true identity has been revealed. He is the Green City's city lord appointed by the Eternal Forest's Elven King. Fuck. Is this true or false? The Elven King's brain must have been damaged. Everyone broke out in curses. Everyone knew that Green City couldn't hold on any longer, but they had received secret news that the Eternal Forest was prepared to take over, so they were able to stay calm until now. As long as Green City became a city under the Eternal Forest's control, with the elves' powerful military strength, Green City would have a chance to prosper again. In the end, the Elven King took over, but he gave the city to a human. Wasn't this just a joke? If the elves did not send an army, how could a foreign human stabilize the situation? There's still more, there's still more. Green City's acting city lord Sir Clark has already resigned. After the Green Religion's priests' research, it has been decided that the human Chu Tian will be the acting city lord of Green City. This order will take effect immediately. The human Chu Tian has already moved into the main castle and has begun to take over the Gnome City's affairs. This really was a shocking piece of news. It was like a bomb exploding in their mouths. It made people unable to close their mouth. Was this a joke? It was fine if the Eternal Forest was messing around, but now the gnomes were also messing around? There's some news that this human was the leader of a small power on the edge of the Forest of Chaos. It said that he was a merchant from a small company, but he came to Green City alone to be the city lord. Fuck, a brat still wet behind the ears. What qualifications does he have to be Green City's city lord? Fuck, the gnomes can't do it. Why don't you let father do it? Is Green City finished? This time it wasn't just merchants and adventurers, it also caused a large stir among the gnomes. How could Sir Clark let a human take over as the city lord? This was just too unreasonable. Around half an hour ago, Chu Tian had just been appointed. Although there was a problem with the plan and he couldn't control the forest tribes, it didn't matter too much. The gnomes and shamans had a deep grudge. The Green Country shamans led by Luz could not obtain the gnomes' trust, and they could be retaliated against by the savage highlands. The most correct method was to support Chu Tian as the city lord. This would ensure that the shamans would be protected by Green City and still have room to grow. The Minotaur Arnold also supported Chu Tian, and there was also the demonic god religion that Dolores belonged to. Although Chu Tian didn't have many cards he could use, with this great merit, Clark still gave him the acting city lord position. Chu Tian brought Dolores to the city lord's castle. On the road, Dolores had a depressed expression. Hey, I've successfully taken the first step. Since I've obtained the acting city lord position, I'm not far from becoming the city lord. You've also been promoted to the city lord's assistant, shouldn't we celebrate? Chu Tian shook the beautiful city lord robe that the gnomes had just made for him, for example, a passionate kiss. If it was normal times, Dolores wouldn't have suggested playing around with this human, but she didn't seem to be in the mood right now. If this decision is announced now, it will definitely cause a large controversy among the gnomes. The Eternal Forest's new city lord for Green City is a human. This is a fact that no one can accept. Aren't you afraid of your subordinates rebelling? There was no denying it. Chu Tian was a human with great abilities. In this conflict with the shaman sorcerers, if it wasn't for Chu Tian's skills, the gnomes would have suffered heavy losses. But in the end, he was still a human and he hadn't matured yet, so now was not the time to reveal his identity. Chu Tian did not have his own influence in Green City, and the demonic god religion did not have much influence in Green City. Luz had only submitted to him due to pressure. As for the gnomes, there were a few old fellows that appreciated him, but most of the gnomes would not accept a human as the city lord. Their current method was to push Chu Tian to the heart of the struggle. It looked very glorious on the surface, but the water underneath was very deep. Chu Tian's situation was that of a city lord without an army. This identity was just a symbol, the authority was still in the gnomes' hands. Dolores said, "I think the gnomes are purposely making trouble for you. You have done a large merit and you have indeed been recognized by the Eternal Forest, as well as received orders from the Elven King. So the gnomes will not deal with you based on their personal feelings, but the gnomes have been hiding, waiting for you to make a mistake." Chu Tian was just a tied-up acting city lord. As long as he was not the true city lord, it meant the gnomes still had some leeway. Green City's complicated situation would not be solved because of the shaman crisis. There were still many internal and external problems that needed to be solved. With Chu Tian becoming the acting city lord, the situation would become even more complicated. If Chu Tian made a mistake or caused losses, the gnomes could use this to ask the Eternal Forest to change the Elven King's orders and find an Elven expert to hold the fort. This would give Chu Tian a chance. This was also the gnomes' strategy of advancing and retreating. No matter how big Chu Tian's merit was, deep in the gnomes' hearts, they still did not recognize his identity. They were still doubtful of his ability and status. No matter, I like the challenge. Chu Tian walked into the gorgeous city lord's castle and stood in front of a wide floor-to-ceiling window. The sunlight spilled in from the outside, making the room very bright. When he looked outside, his field of vision was filled with a vast expanse of white. When he opened a door, this was a natural little garden. The grass was soft and there were hundreds of flowers blooming. There was a small river flowing through it, but it suddenly stopped at a cliff, turning into a silver waterfall that fell thousands of feet into the sky. The sea of clouds was like waves, with islands floating on top of it. This was the peak of the mountain range. The city lord's castle Chu Tian was in the middle of the mountain range. It was a castle built on top of a mountain peak, overlooking the entire mountain range and the entire Green City area. The city lord's castle was very large. The entire castle had more than 100 floors. Looking at it from below, half of the majestic mountain had been transformed into a castle. The city and nature were perfectly integrated. It was like a work of art. The holy radiance shined through the dense treasure aura. The entire world was covered in a powerful spiritual pressure. This was truly a rare paradise. Green City's location was very good, but it was a pity there were too few people, so it was very deserted. But this situation wouldn't last long. As long as the Miracle Commerce headquarters were moved here, Green City's influence would grow larger and larger, finally becoming one of the most important cities in the Forest of Chaos. Chu Tian was very satisfied with the castle. He turned to his assistant and said, "All right, we can't be lazy on our first day. Immediately bring all the documents over, this city lord is going to start working." Chapter 419. In the city lord's office, Chu Tian was sitting on a white jade throne inlaid with gems, holding a cup of tea that his assistant had just brewed. The water was good water, it was the spring of life from the Green Temple. The tea was also good tea, it was the elven race's high-quality elven green tea. His life was very comfortable. In front of Chu Tian was a person-tall mirror, the image in it went from blurry to clear, finally forming the image of a girl. Although she wasn't tall, she was slender and elegant. Her skin was as white as snow and her figure was exquisite. What should be big was big, what should be thin was thin, what should be long was long, and what should be round was round. She was filled with the vitality of youth, in short, there were no flaws that could be found. She brought her face closer for a closer look. This allowed Chu Tian to observe her cheeks up close. They were as smooth as porcelain, her large eyes were as clear as crystal, her nose was exquisite and straight, her peachy lips were red, and her black hair draped over her shoulders. She looked obedient and beautiful. Chu Tian proudly shook his robe. "How about it? I didn't lie to you. Why aren't you greeting Sir City Lord yet?" "What?" Meng Yingying's eyes lit up and her mouth spat out a series of questions. "Is this your office? It looks so luxurious. What's outside the window? Is it a garden? Why does it look like it's in the clouds?" Did you really become the city lord? How could it be this fast? Wouldn't you know if you came over to take a look? Chu Tian waved his hand like this small matter wasn't worth mentioning to him. How is Oldman's small town situation? Elder sister has already unified the surrounding locals and is now planning to build a commercial and industrial city. The initial plan is to hold 2 million people. This way Miracle Commerce will have large amounts of labor. The new crystal oil mine has been successfully mined and the scale is much larger than imagined, so we can start researching the new generation of source energy weapons. Vivian has developed the 4th space warehouse, and the flower fairies have created a stable spiritual space. Our cultivation bases have increased by a large amount and also, not bad. No one was lazy. Since everything is developing smoothly, then come over as soon as possible. I'm lacking manpower by my side and need the help of you and the young miss. All right. Meng Yingying was delighted. She had wanted to go there for a long time. Yingying, are you communicating with Chu Tian? Why do I hear his voice? At this time, a very magnetic and pleasant female voice sounded from the side. Then, a tall beauty with an extremely hot figure appeared in the mirror. Who else could it be other than the eldest miss? Chu Tian immediately greeted Missy. When Meng Qingwu saw Chu Tian sit on the city lord's throne, she was naturally very surprised. She never thought that Chu Tian would progress so quickly. Chu Tian didn't have anything to hide from the young miss, so he told her what had happened and the current situation. Like this, your position is not stable. We need a large amount of money to develop Green City. It's a good thing that Miracle Commerce's revenue has been increasing over the past few months, so we already have quite a bit of money in reserve. Meng Qingwu said without any hesitation, if we don't count the value of other resources, Miracle Commerce has a total of 25,000 source stones. Now that the company's business is very large, we need to keep 5,000 low-grade source stones. The other 20,000 will be stored in the company's special space warehouse. If you need money on that side, you can use it at any time. I will try my best to convert my resources into more primordial stones for my development. Miracle Commerce already had this much money? This number far surpassed Chu Tian's expectations. This was just the pure source stone reserve. If the resources stored by Miracle Commerce were exchanged for source stones, it would be at least a single digit. Chu Tian was filled with confidence after understanding this. With the young miss as his wife, Chu Tian didn't have any worries at all. There were clear footsteps coming from the hall. It was Dolores coming back. All right, let's not talk for today. This city lord is going to start working hard. Chu Tian said this to the young miss and Yingying before closing the communication channel. He looked up. Pung! All kinds of scrolls, accounts, and notes were piled up in front of him like a small mountain. There were several hundred of them, and this completely stunned Chu Tian. What kind of mess was this? My dear Sir City Lord, what are you stunned for? The beautiful City Lord's assistant Dolores revealed a mischievous smile. This is only a small part. The 3 rooms next door are all filled with information the City Lord needs to look over. Is there a mistake? How could there be this much? Think about it. The tax bills of the various regions, the caravan's registration information, the city's personnel, the development of the city, the surrounding forest's dynamics, the forest's influence, the research, the people's livelihood, the city's construction draft, the water project, the farming, the public security. All of this information is here. Do you think the city lord gives orders? All right. We'll wait for the young miss to see all of this. Chu Tian wiped his sweat. He never thought being the city lord would be this troublesome. It was like a bucket of cold water had been poured over him. What do I need to know now? How could there be a city lord like you? Dolores secretly criticized him, but she still replied, Green City's situation is not optimistic. The gnome's financial deficit is already very high, and I've just looked at the most recent year's expenditure. It has actually reached 165% of the income. The gnomes are already on the verge of bankruptcy, and their tax revenue has not even reached 50% in the last 10 years. The trend of decline is very serious. Do you know what this means? What does this mean? The Eternal Forest and Green City have an agreement. After the gnomes give the city to the Eternal Forest, the wealth and resources the gnomes have accumulated over the years will belong to the gnomes, and the Eternal Forest will continue to support the gnomes' expenditure. In other words, from the moment you became the city lord, you automatically took over the gnomes' losses and debt. With a simple calculation of the current income gap, you will need to pay around 26,500 low-grade source stones every month. The Fox clan was very sensitive to money. This point was fully reflected by Dolores. She was able to clearly understand the financial situation in this short period of time. Pooh! Chu Tian almost spat out the tea in his mouth onto her. You have to pay several tens of thousands of source stones every month. This kind of leaking pot, how could the Eternal Forest accept it? You're joking. This depends on whose hands it is in. Although the elves are not rich, they can still bear this bit of loss. Moreover, if Green City has a strong elven power, it will quickly recover and the losses will turn into profit. There is no need to do anything at all, so for the elves, this is a business that will not lose anything. Dolores said this and looked at Chu Tian. As for it being in your hands, don't blame me for attacking you. Once you announce the matter of you becoming the city lord, half of Green City's caravans will run away, and the other half will already be on their way. This month's tax revenue will be greatly reduced, and the financial revenue will be paralyzed. I think you should be praying for your own good fortune. Making up for several tens of thousands of source stones every month. This was not a small number to anyone, right? Chu Tian's miracle commerce indeed had money, but it had only been established for a short period of time, so it could not compare to the large forest clans. Now that he had to take over this plate, it was a bit hard to bear. Where are these source stones being spent? Can it be reduced a bit? Dolores quickly looked over the financial details. These are mainly the purchase of materials, the use of Green City's military defenses, the consumption of the farms, and the gnomes' welfare. These are around half of it. Then what about the other half? Of course it's research and development. Dolores rolled her eyes. It's not like you don't know that the gnomes have the strongest thirst for knowledge and exploration. The gnomes' research level is one of the highest in the entire Forest of Chaos, so the materials and resources needed for research and experiments are a large number. If Chu Tian took over Green City, of course there were ways to reduce the consumption of normal materials and the military budget, but these were all small parts, not even a quarter of the total. The main expenditure was the gnomes' welfare and the gnomes' research. This was the basic condition for the gnomes to join the Eternal Forest. The Elven King had also promised to protect them. Since he had been appointed as Green City's permanent city lord, Chu Tian and Miracle Commerce naturally had the responsibility to shoulder this responsibility. Chu Tian never would have thought that after becoming the acting city lord with great difficulty, he would not obtain any benefits at all. Instead, he would have to support several 100,000 gnomes. This large pressure was enough to give him a headache. Clark is trying to make me back off. But these gnomes are looking down on me too much. Chu Tian thought about it and said, "Go and issue my first order. When this city lord is in office, the entire city will be exempted from all transaction taxes and business taxes." You're crazy. Dolores' eyes popped out. This is no different from cutting off an arm. The financial deficit is already serious enough. Do you think the hole isn't big enough? It's like you just said, half of the merchants are preparing to run and the other half are already on the way. What use is there in me stubbornly holding on to these taxes? Keep them here first and there will be ways to make money from them in the future. As for the financial hole, Reduce it as much as possible and I'll make up for the rest. Chu Tian said with a face of disdain. Isn't it just 10,000 source stones? It's not like I can't afford it. You! Dolores knew that Chu Tian's background was not simple, but seeing Chu Tian's heroic spirit, not even placing a large sum in his eyes, she couldn't help looking at Chu Tian a bit higher. All right, it's fine as long as you think there's no problem. Chu Tian didn't care what kind of stir he caused in Green City or the Forest of Chaos. He just issued his first order. I'm very interested in the gnome's research lab. Come, let's go take a look. Chu Tian's second order of business was to understand the gnome's situation. After all, the gnomes were a rare high-level intellectual race in the forest, which was very compatible with miracle commerce. Green City had been built for an entire 500 years. The gnome's research lab had been built for an entire 500 years. This was not something Southern Xia's environment could compare to. Chu Tian wanted to personally see what was different about it. Chapter 420. The First Order was announced. Green City was once again in an uproar. This method was cutting off most of the basic income. This was a hard-to-understand matter in any city. Not to mention that Green City was already in a bad situation, and now they were cutting off the income from the merchants. How would the city survive? Clark quickly came to find Chu Tian to ask him about this. Chu Tian did not explain his actions, rather he arrogantly said, "You have to look further. Green City's population is already small enough. What can this little bit of tax be used for? It would be better to make the city the first tax-free city in the Forest of Chaos and raise its popularity first. You can be assured, the gnome's welfare and regular expenses, even if I pay out of my own pocket, I won't give you a single source stone." This person had a lot of money and was rich and overbearing. This made the gnomes feel confused. Could it be that this human had another power behind him? Otherwise, how could his expression not change in the face of such a large hole in their finances? Even if they could fill in this large hole, this power was not simple. But seeing Chu Tian's solemn promise, although the gnomes were filled with doubts, they couldn't do anything to him. Clark came at the right time. Chu Tian said to him, "I'm prepared to visit the gnome research base and the construction of the city. I wonder if this is convenient for me?" These couldn't be shown to outsiders. However, Chu Tian was now the acting city lord. If the acting city lord couldn't even understand the city's situation, how could he manage the city? Clark discussed with the gnome elders for a few minutes. "Of course there's no problem. Please come with us." The gnome research base had always been a secret and was also one of the most mysterious places in this area. Being able to follow by Chu Tian's side this time was a chance for her to broaden her horizons. The gnomes introduced it as they walked. The gnome research base was established at the same time as Green City and has a very long history. It is also the most complete research base in the forest. The Green Religion Temple next to the mountain was the entrance to the gnome research base. After entering the mountain, there were 4 elevators in front of them. Chu Tian and Dolores stood in the elevator, and the elevator immediately began to descend. They were surrounded by transparent crystal observation windows. When everyone sat in the elevator and descended, they could clearly feel that they were shuttling through different rock formations. Very, very deep. They descended about 400 to 500 meters. Finally, a huge underground world appeared in front of them. Dolores felt her masseter muscles go out of control as her chin fell down and her eyes popped out. She found it hard to believe that there was such a large hole under Green City. This was simply incredible. The gnome explained, "The Forest of Chaos geology is very special. Our ancestors studied the geology of the forest, and were surprised to find that there were many holes in the Forest of Chaos. There were some deep underground worlds with large amounts of demons, dark elves, and other dark creatures living there. There were also some places that were so deep that one couldn't see the bottom, possibly hiding the secrets of the great ancient era. There wouldn't be any demons under Green City, right? It's not that there isn't a possibility, but we haven't found one yet. The elevator was about to reach its destination. When Chu Tian looked down from above, he could see gnome warehouses next to each other. On the straight tracks there were actually trains parked there. Each train had a streamlined front and there were several to 30 rectangular containers in the center. It was an underground train station. In front of them, there was a large number of palaces that appeared in front of them. The size of the underground palace could hold several 100,000 people living inside. The entire underground palace was made of metal and was filled with a modern style. There were many metal pipes here. The large ones were several meters thick and needed several people to wrap their arms around them. The small ones were only a few centimeters thick and were not much thicker than a finger. It was very complicated and very dense. The entire research base was connected by these large and small pipes. There was more than one underground palace like this. If one looked from afar, they would see several underground palaces flashing with lights. Between these palaces was a dark abyss that couldn't be seen, and the underground palaces were like lighthouses in a dark world. They were all connected by floating tunnels or cable cars. Although the underground world was deep, it was not as dark or as silent as one would imagine. Other than the lighthouses in the underground palaces, the walls in all directions were covered in glowing crystals and strange glowing plants. Dolores even saw a glowing mushroom. Its cap was at least 30 meters in diameter, and it was like a huge light bulb that illuminated a large area around it. Gurgling water flowed out of the cracks in the rocks, turning into a clear waterfall that fell into a bottomless abyss. There were some strange lizards and bats that were currently moving around on the walls. In this space that never saw the light of day, there was actually a strange ecosystem that made people sigh in amazement at the wonders of the Creator. This underground space is unfathomably deep, and we still haven't found out how deep it is. However, the underground world is very rich in minerals, and the deeper one goes, the richer the resources. Of course, the deeper one goes, the higher the chance of being attacked by dangerous creatures. Chu Tian fell into deep thought as he looked into the bottomless abyss. Regarding the underground world of the Forest of Chaos, of course he had some understanding. This was a very complex place, especially in this era. It was unknown how many dangers were hidden here and how many treasures were hidden here. If he had a chance in the future, he would have to properly explore it. Of course, it was not the right time yet and he did not have the strength to do so. Clark said in a proud voice, "The gnomes used an entire 200 years to create a complete transportation network. The gnomes' transportation system was made up of trains and cable cars. When they came out of the elevator, a station appeared in front of them. The train was made up of several carriages that were tight and stable. This was the gnomes' underground train. The gnomes have 7 underground research bases and have found over 100 precious resources." Clark said in a proud voice, "These underground railways are like blood vessels, connecting the gnomes' research bases, mines, farms, and production areas, forming an efficient production network. This truly is a complex and difficult project. Normal people might not be able to complete it." Dolores said to Clark, "How do these trains move? Come with me to the power room and you'll understand." Clark opened the power room of a train, and there was a honeycomb-type power room inside. Each power room was filled with red powder and there was a source energy array engraved on the surface of the power room. There were also large amounts of source stones embedded to activate the source energy array. The power source of the train is a stable fire-attributed crystal powder. This powder can release a strong flame and energy which is finally absorbed by the source energy array, forming a complete power system that can easily push a several hundred-ton train forward, reaching a maximum speed of 300 kilometers per hour. This made Chu Tian a bit shocked. Although the gnome's technology did not enter his eyes, at least in this era, it could be considered quite advanced. The cost of the flame crystal stones was not high. Using the energy of the crystal stones to move the train forward would greatly reduce the cost of the train, but the source energy array would consume spirit energy. This source stone consumption would not be a small number. Clark explained, the entire transportation network will consume at least 1,000 low-grade source stones every month. This was too wasteful. There was no need for this consumption at all. Miracle Commerce's source energy battery cost was low and it could maintain the consumption of source energy. Chu Tian only needed to make some simple modifications and he could easily save a large amount of source stones. Now we invite Sir Acting City Lord to visit the gnome's research base. The gnome train rumbled as it slowly moved forward. The first place it went to was the underground palace in front of them. The entire underground palace was covered in train tracks, and they could clearly see the entire underground palace as they passed through the countless buildings. This is the Fire Energy Research Room. This is the Water Energy Research Room. This is the Water of Life Synthesis Room. This is... When Chu Tian rode the gnome train through the gnome's research base, he could be considered to have experienced just how grand the gnome's research base was. The gnomes loved to explore by nature. It was no wonder they could easily give Green City away. This was because for the gnomes, as long as they had this underground research base and the corresponding funds, it was more than enough. Why is this place this big? Dolores looked at the large round space in front of her and asked, "What's inside?" This is the Underground Creature Research Lab. Underground Creature. Clark opened the door to the research lab. Huge prison cells lined up in front of him. Inside each cell was a strange-looking creature. Dolores stared at the thing in the first prison cell. That fellow looked a bit strange. Its body was extremely evil and slender, only supported by a few tentacles. However, its head was as big as a bucket, and a dazzling light was condensing in its large eyeball. Suddenly, with a pring sound, Dolores was shocked. This creature's eye shot out a beam of light. If it wasn't for the gnome prison's barrier protecting them, Dolores would not have been able to dodge this beam of light that could melt steel. Dolores asked, "What kind of monster is this?" "You're too ignorant." Chu Tian did not wait for the gnomes to explain before saying, "This thing is called an evil eye, a very common underground creature. Its main ability is to use its eyes to shoot beams of light." Clark and the gnomes revealed looks of admiration to Chu Tian once again. This kind of creature is rarely seen on the surface. The acting city lord is truly knowledgeable. "Che, what's wrong with that?" Chu Tian curled his lips in disdain and immediately looked at the other creatures. He couldn't help admiring the gnomes. They could actually raise all these dark creatures here. It was simply like a museum. He finally understood why the gnomes spent so much money on their research lab. The scale, equipment, and level of these research labs were all at the top of the world. Spending several tens of thousands of low-grade source stones every month was already very frugal. Clark asked, "The gnomes do not have any hobbies other than searching for the truth. Although most of the gnomes' research cannot be turned into profit, this is the joy of the gnomes. So, if you really want to become the city lord, then this research lab." "You're thinking too much. You have to understand, I am also a scholar." Chu Tian patted the gnome's shoulder. "This research lab is Green City's true wealth. Compared to it, those castles on the surface are not even worth mentioning. Not only will I not close this research lab, I will also increase the resources, talents, and technology investment by 10 to 100 times, making this research lab even more glorious." Dolores on the side opened her mouth, but did not say anything. Clark and the gnomes revealed looks of gratitude and admiration. Chapter 421. Why wouldn't Chu Tian be happy? The gnomes had spent several hundred years to build such a solid foundation. How much effort did this allow Chu Tian to save? This was like a person wanting to buy a house, but in the end a luxurious beast carriage, servants, guards, and even a beautiful maid to warm the bed were all given to him. This was too good a deal. The Gnome research base was the standard of this era, even the strong empires of the continent couldn't compare. With this kind of good foundation and the technology and team that Chu Tian brought, it would create unimaginable value in the future. Chu Tian was very much looking forward to using this research base. The gnomes' thoughts were not as complicated as humans, but the gnomes could feel that Chu Tian's words were not just for show. This human seemed to place a lot of importance on research, and this kind of person becoming the city lord was very beneficial to the gnomes. The elves were strong, but they were not interested in this. So, if Chu Tian fully supported the research base, he would gain the recognition of the gnomes. The Dark Creature Research Base had several dozen low-level dark creatures, like evil eyes and cave spiders. There were several hundred of them, and the cost of raising them each day was not a small number. Chu Tian was very puzzled. Why did the gnomes capture these creatures? Could it be that they wanted to refine a synthetic life form? This kind of synthetic life form refining was a kind of advanced technology that the gnomes could not do. Clark explained, "There are countless of these creatures in the underground world, and they often come to harass us. The goal of our research is to find the weakness of these creatures and find a better way to deal with them." Chu Tian stared at a large cave spider and pondered for a few seconds. "You're saying that there are many of these creatures in this place? The underground creatures are different from the ones on the surface. They are more tenacious, eating the underground plants or eating crystal stones to survive. For example, the evil eyes and eye demons live in the crystal mines and eat the crystal stones to obtain energy. They grow very quickly, just like cockroaches and mice that can't be killed. I suspect that in the area we've explored, there are at least several tens of thousands of them, giving us a headache." "That many?" Chu Tian's eyes lit up. "Good. Very good." The gnomes looked at each other in blank dismay. What did the acting city lord's praise mean? Was it a good thing that there were so many monsters hiding underground? "Do you have a map?" "Map? Oh yes." This was a map of the underground research base. It clearly marked the location of the underground palace and the railway, as well as the mines and caverns that had been explored in the surroundings. As for the areas where dark creatures often appeared, there were gnomes guarding them. This was to prevent strange creatures from destroying the research, and also to prevent them from threatening Green City. The underground world was too complicated. It was like a huge maze. According to Chu Tian's understanding of the world, the light energy was distributed in the sky and the dark energy was buried underground. The deeper one went underground, the stronger the negative energy. He didn't know how far the forest of chaos underground world extended, but he was sure that there were evil dark creatures deep underground. The gnomes didn't dare explore too deep and didn't dare explore too far because they were afraid of accidentally touching terrifying monsters that they couldn't kill. But even at this level, there were still many monsters living there. "Let's go and take a look at this area." The place Chu Tian was talking about was a cave. Because the cave looked like the large mouth of a demon, and even the rocks inside were a terrifying dark red color, it was called the Demon's Mouth. It's said that most of the underground monsters the gnomes met came out of the demon's mouth. Therefore the gnomes thought that the demon's mouth was an even deeper and more terrifying underground space. In order to not disturb existences that shouldn't be disturbed, the demon's mouth was not allowed to be casually explored. "Elder!" Several gnome troops stationed here saw the train stop at the Demon's Mouth station, and they immediately ran over to ask about it out of curiosity. "Sir Acting City Lord." Clark looked at Chu Tian and asked, "Are you sure you want to go in? Even the gnomes don't dare explore this place, and even we don't dare go too deep. If you take the risk on a whim, I'm afraid." "It's fine, I'm not a fool. If something is wrong, I'll come back." "All right then." Chu Tian pulled out his sword and left. Dolores followed without any hesitation. Clark saw that he couldn't persuade Chu Tian, so he had the gnome troops prepare themselves before leading the old priests to chase after him. At this time, Chu Tian had already walked a certain distance. Dolores looked at the surrounding walls and said while walking, "The dark aura here is very thick, making people feel very uncomfortable." The fungi and vines in the demon's mouth were mostly a strange purple or blue color, and the rocks were dark red, making it seem dark. The cave was open in all directions. Sometimes it was wide, sometimes it was narrow, sometimes it was as steep as a mountain, and sometimes it was separated by a deep ravine. There were always strange fluctuations and sounds coming from all around, making this place feel an ominous aura. Chu Tian felt the fluctuations in the air. "There's a monster coming." He didn't even finish his sentence. There were sharp sounds coming from all directions as giant figures quickly charged out. They were very fast, and even in this complicated terrain, they could still move at high speeds. Other than Chu Tian, they were all in the true spirit realm. Dolores was prepared to make a move, but she didn't even have time to use the demonic god priest's summoning technique. She suddenly felt like she had been hit several times, and her head instantly turned dizzy. She couldn't even stand straight and fell onto Chu Tian's body beside her. Chu Tian quickly supported Dolores. A fierce figure charged out, and several sharp claws swept out like lightning, trying to tear Chu Tian and Dolores to pieces. Fuck, seeking death. Chu Tian's blade was covered in blue flames, and a beautiful sword chi slashed out. That monster gave a pitiful cry and flapped its wings to fly away. However, although it wasn't cut in half by the sword chi, it was covered in the terrifying netherworld flame. It didn't have time to retreat before its body was surrounded by blue and white flames, and it let out a shrill cry before turning into ashes. The gnome priests were all very shocked. Chu Tian had just casually slashed out, but it was enough to show his strength. This was definitely not an attack an awakened soul cultivator could send out. Perhaps even a true spirit realm expert wouldn't be able to easily block it. This human young brat really wasn't simple. "Be careful." Clark recovered from the dizziness and quickly shouted, "These are bat demons. They can use spiritual attacks and are very hard to deal with." Chu Tian had indeed been hit by a few weak spiritual attacks, but this spiritual attack couldn't affect him at all. When he had just exchanged blows, he had seen what the attackers looked like. It was a monster with an ape-like human body, but it had bat-like wings. Each one was very big, weighing at least 200 kilograms. Spiritual attacks could affect true spirit realm experts? Then this was truly an incredible monster. Chu Tian noticed that the bat demon's spiritual attack was a large area indiscriminate attack released by ultrasonic wave. He couldn't help thinking that if there was this kind of monster on the battlefield, it would sweep through a large area. This was not exaggerated at all. Even a true spirit realm expert like Dolores was hit without any preparation and instantly lost her battle strength. Wouldn't a normal awakened soul cultivator bleed from their 7 orifices and die? Good, very good. If they could tame this kind of monster and use it for Green City, why would Green City be afraid of invaders? Compared to the Marauders' mounts, the bat demons were not only stronger, but also more intelligent. They had the intelligence of a 6 or 7-year-old human child. If they could be tamed, they would be able to understand some commands. Chu Tian came here with this goal in mind. Not to mention Chu Tian having several beast-taming methods, with the little fox and the demonic god religion's priests, these headache-inducing monsters could be easily tamed. This was not trouble. This was a large amount of wealth. The green religion priests used a secret technique to resist the spiritual attack. Clark forcefully raised his staff, and a vine reached out, instantly grabbing onto a fast-flying bat demon. This bat demon let out a pitiful cry as its vitality and water were sucked away, finally turning into a dried corpse that was hung above the cave. They didn't have time to kill more bat demons. The left wall suddenly shattered and several beams of light as thick as an arm shot out at them. A green religion priest quickly released a talisman to condense a shield of light. When the powerful beams of light landed on the shield of light, it shattered it to pieces, barely blocking this attack. Dolores had just recovered. What happened now? Dolores discovered that in all directions of the dark cave, there were many light bulb-like lights appearing at the same time. These lights went from weak to strong, and in the end, they became very dazzling, so much so that she could barely open her eyes. Evil eyes, damn, there are so many evil eyes. The evil eyes had excellent dark vision, and their range of vision was even greater than an eagle's. Their eyes could break through illusions and camouflage, as well as release a kind of radiation that could clearly see a person through a wall. The evil eyes could not make any sounds, so they used their minds to communicate. Although their intelligence was not high, they had a tacit understanding. This many evil eyes attacking together. This power was more than enough to kill one true spirit realm expert. Clark raised the long staff in his hand high up, and a layer of emerald green light barrier slanted down to the side. The beams of light shot by the evil eyes were all absorbed by the barrier, and only ripples appeared on the surface of the barrier. Great Forest Goddess, please unleash your great power. Clark released a dazzling green light. In the next second, Clark's entire body exploded. His body disappeared and turned into a large field of green leaves. These green leaves were like countless butterflies, fluttering and spreading in all directions like an all-pervasive tide. In an instant, the field of vision was drowned. These leaves looked weak, but they were actually endowed with the power of divine weapons. They could easily slice through the bat demons, and those weak evil eyes couldn't even withstand a single blow. When the leaves floated past them, their bodies would immediately break into pieces. Dolores said in a shocked voice, "This Clark's strength is not weaker than the shaman's Mars." The leaves all turned back into Clark's short figure. However, there was not a single complete monster in the surroundings. They had all been cut into pieces, and some had even turned into minced meat. Chu Tian wanted to say a few words of praise, but he felt a strange energy fluctuation. One of the evil eyes that had been cut in half was slowly coming back together, finally standing up again. That big head shook left and right, as if it didn't understand what had just happened. Then it saw its companions wriggling all over the ground, and its eyes began to release a light blue glow. Shwa! The star-like light fell on one of its dying companions, and the unthinkable happened. The evil eye, whose body had been broken into several pieces, suddenly recovered and stood up with its tentacles. Clark knit his brows. He picked up a leaf, and was about to shatter the strange evil eye. "Slow down, this is a bit interesting." Chu Tian stopped Clark from killing the evil eye. The evil eye's energy depends on its food. If an evil eye eats fire attribute crystals for a few days, its attack beam will become fire attribute. If it eats thunder attribute crystals recently, then its attack beam will become thunder attribute. This evil eye's energy is very special, which means that the place it lives in most likely has special mineral deposit. We might as well let it go for now and find that place. It might be useful to us. Chu Tian had actually already recognized it. The evil eye could release light beams similar to star energy, and the star energy had healing abilities. Therefore, it could heal its injured companions. This evil eye had most likely eaten some special ore, and this kind of ore might be useful to Chu Tian. Chu Tian decided to try his luck and perhaps reap some unexpected rewards. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.